Standing in the crowded banquet hall, watching my sister Sarah receive her medical degree, I felt tears of pride streaming down my face. For 6 years, I'd sent $9,000 annually from my teacher's salary, living in a studio apartment and driving a 15-year-old Honda while she pursued her dream. But when she spotted me at her graduation party, her face twisted with disgust. "Your job is done, Lula. You shouldn't be here." Mom laughed beside her. "You don't know your place." I smiled and left quietly. 6 years earlier, our entire family had gathered in my parents' living room on a humid June evening. Sarah clutched her acceptance letter from the prestigious Whitmore Medical School, her hands trembling with excitement. At 22, she was the golden child, the one who'd always dreamed of becoming a doctor since she'd received her first toy stethoscope at age 5. "This is incredible news, sweetheart," Dad said, beaming with pride as he adjusted his reading glasses to look at the letter again. "Whitmore is one of the best medical schools in the country." Mom clasped her hands together, tears glistening in her eyes. "Our daughter, a doctor. Can you imagine what the neighbors will say?" The joy in the room was palpable until Dad cleared his throat and set down the financial aid packet that had come with the acceptance letter. "There's just one small problem. The tuition is $54,000 a year, and with living expenses, books and equipment, we're looking at close to $70,000 annually." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face crumpled as she stared at the numbers. "But I thought we had college savings." "We did," Mom said quickly, "but your undergraduate degree took most of it. We have about $15,000 left, which might cover part of your first semester." I watched my sister's dream shatter before my eyes. As a high school English teacher 3 years into my career, I understood the weight of student loans. I'd just finished paying off my own modest debt from state college. "What about loans?" Sarah asked desperately. "You'd be looking at over $400,000 in debt by graduation," Dad explained. "The monthly payments would cripple you for decades, even with a doctor's salary." That's when I heard myself speaking the words coming from somewhere deep inside me. "I'll help." Everyone turned to stare at me. I was 26 then, single, living comfortably, but not extravagantly on my teacher's salary. "Lula, that's sweet, but you can't possibly," Mom began. "I can contribute $9,000 a year." I interrupted, having done quick mental math. "That's $750 a month. If I make some adjustments to my lifestyle take on tutoring, maybe summer school teaching, I can manage it." Sarah's eyes widened with hope. "You'd do that for me." "You're my sister," I said simply. "Your dreams matter to me." What happened next would be etched in my memory forever. Sarah launched herself across the room, wrapping her arms around me with such force that we both nearly toppled over. "I'll never forget this, Lula. Never. I promise I'll pay you back every penny once I'm practicing. You're saving my life." Mom and Dad exchanged glances, relief washing over their faces. "That's very generous of you, Lula," Mom said. "Family helps family." We spent the rest of the evening planning. Dad would contribute what he could from his hardware store earnings. Mom would take extra shifts at the dental office where she worked as a receptionist. Together with my contribution and some loans, Sarah could make it work. As the meeting wound down and Sarah went to call her friends with the good news, I helped Mom clear the coffee cups from the table. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the kitchen counter, partially hidden under a magazine, was a brochure for luxury Mediterranean cruises with 2 tickets paperclipped to the front. "Mom," I said slowly, "what's this?" She snatched the brochure away quickly. "Oh, that's nothing. Just something your father and I were dreaming about. Someday you know." But I saw the booking confirmation peeking out. The cruise was scheduled for 3 months from now during Sarah's first semester. The price for the 2-week vacation was exactly what they claimed they couldn't contribute to tuition. "Mom, this cruise costs $23,000. Her face flushed red. "Now, Lula, don't start. Your father and I have worked hard our entire lives. We deserve a little happiness in our golden years." "But you just said—" I said we don't have money for tuition. This is different. This is our retirement savings, our reward for raising you girls. Are you going to begrudge us that? I stared at her in disbelief. So you have money. You're just choosing a cruise over Sarah's education. Don't be dramatic, she snapped. We're still contributing what we can, and besides, you offered to help. Isn't that what family does? I wanted to tell Sarah right then, wanted to expose the lie. But looking at my sister's radiant face as she chatted excitedly on the phone about her future, I couldn't bring myself to destroy her happiness. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe this was just what family did. That night, I went home to my cozy 2-bedroom apartment and sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and notepad. $750 a month meant no more organic groceries, no more yoga classes, no more weekend trips to visit college friends. It meant every single dollar would need to be accounted for. But seeing Sarah's joy, hearing her talk about saving lives and making a difference, I told myself it would be worth every sacrifice. She was my little sister, and she was going to be a doctor. I had no idea that this moment of generosity would cost me far more than money. As I signed up for my first tutoring client the next day, I couldn't have imagined that my sacrifice would eventually be thrown back in my face with such cruelty, or that the very people I was trying to help would be the ones to show me just how little they truly valued my love. The reality of my new financial commitment hit me just 2 months later. My landlord, Mr. Peterson, knocked on my door on a steamy August afternoon with an apologetic expression that told me everything before he even spoke. Lula, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to raise the rent. The property taxes went up and maintenance costs are killing me. Starting October, it'll be an extra $200 a month. I felt my stomach drop. My comfortable 2-bedroom apartment with its sunny breakfast nook and small balcony where I grew tomatoes would now be impossible to afford. That evening, I spent hours on rental websites, my heart sinking with each listing. Everything in my price range was either in unsafe neighborhoods or required a commute that would cost me more in gas than I'd save in rent. Finally, I found a studio apartment above a dry cleaner's shop, 400 square feet of space that smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. The Murphy bed folded into the wall, the kitchen was just a hot plate and mini fridge, and the bathroom was so small I could touch both walls while sitting on the toilet. But it was $300 less than my current rent. Are you sure about this? My friend Jennifer asked when she helped me move. She was a lawyer at a small firm downtown, and we'd been friends since college. This place is, well, it's pretty rough. It's temporary, I assured her, though the words felt hollow, just until Sarah graduates. The next sacrifice came when my reliable Toyota needed a new transmission. The mechanic quoted me $3,000 for repairs on a car worth maybe $5,000. I sold it to a junkyard for $500 and used that as a down payment on a 15-year-old Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on the odometer. The air conditioning didn't work. The passenger window was stuck halfway down and it made a grinding noise when I turned left, but it ran. My colleague Marcus raised an eyebrow when he saw me getting into it after school. What happened to your car? Decided to downsize, I said with forced cheerfulness. Better for the environment, you know. He didn't look convinced, but thankfully didn't push the issue. The tutoring jobs came next. Every weekday evening from 4 to 8, I drove to students' homes helping struggling teenagers with essay writing and literature analysis. Saturdays were booked solid from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. Sundays, I graded papers and prepped lessons for the coming week. My days blurred together in an exhausting cycle. Wake up at 5, shower in the cramped bathroom dress in increasingly worn professional clothes I couldn't afford to replace. Teach from 7:30 to 3:30 tutor until 8. Come home to a dinner of ramen noodles or peanut butter sandwiches. Grade papers until midnight. Collapse into the Murphy bed, repeat. The weight began falling off me gradually. First 5 pounds, then 10, then 15. My clothes hung loose on my frame, but I cinched them tighter with belts from thrift stores. When concerned colleagues commented, I laughed it off. Just trying to get healthier. I'd say not mentioning that I'd been skipping lunch to save $6 a day. One October evening, as I sat tutoring the Harrison twins in their family's spacious colonial home, Mrs. Harrison brought me a cup of tea and a plate of cookies. "Lula, forgive me for saying this, but you look exhausted," she said gently. "Are you feeling all right?" I forced a smile, wrapping my hands around the warm mug to hide their slight tremor. "Just the busy season at school, you know how it is." She studied me with motherly concern but didn't press further. As I drove home that night in my rattling Honda, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles shadowed my eyes. My cheekbones were sharper than they'd ever been, and my skin had taken on a grayish pallor. I looked like a ghost of my former self. Meanwhile, Sarah's life at medical school seemed to be flourishing. Her Facebook posts showed smiling groups of students in pristine white coats, study groups in beautiful library spaces, and social events at upscale restaurants near campus. In every photo, she glowed with health and happiness, living the dream I was killing myself to finance. Our phone calls had dwindled from weekly to monthly, always at my initiation. "How's anatomy class going?" I asked during one rare conversation. "Oh, brutal," she groaned. "The professor is such a hard ass. He actually expects us to memorize every single muscle insertion point. Like, why can't we just look it up when we need it?" I bit my tongue thinking of my students who complained about memorizing 20 vocabulary words, while Sarah was complaining about learning the human body she'd need to save lives. "I'm sure you'll do great," I said instead. "You always do." "Yeah, whatever. Oh, hey, I need to ask you something. There's this amazing study guide software that everyone's using. It's $300, but it would really help with exams. Could you maybe send a little extra this month?" I looked at my bank balance on my laptop screen, $87 to last until payday in 6 days. "I'll see what I can do," I heard myself say. "You're the best, Lula. Oh, got to go study group is here." The line went dead before I could say goodbye. That weekend, I saw something that made my sacrifice even harder to swallow. While scrolling through Instagram during a brief break between tutoring sessions, I stumbled across Sarah's profile. She'd blocked me from her main account, claiming she wanted to keep family and school separate, but I'd found her secondary account by accident through a tagged photo. There, it was posted just 2 days ago, Sarah and several friends on a weekend trip to Miami Beach. Designer sunglasses, expensive swimsuits, champagne bottles on a yacht. The caption read, "Sometimes you just need to escape the books and live a little. So blessed, my family supports my dreams." The comments were full of heart emojis and "Your parents must be so proud," and "Lucky girl to have family that takes care of everything." I stared at the screen, my exhausted brain trying to process what I was seeing. The weekend trip had to have cost at least $1,000. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen for the third night in a row and had just sold my professional wardrobe to a consignment shop to cover her emergency study guide expense. My hands shook as I screenshot the post, some instinct telling me to document this. I wasn't sure why, but something felt deeply wrong about the narrative Sarah was creating. In her world, she was the blessed daughter of wealthy, generous parents. There was no mention of a sister working herself to death to make those dreams possible. That night, I stood in my tiny studio apartment, looking at the 2 outfits I had left for work, the empty refrigerator save for condiments and a loaf of bread, the pile of papers I still had to grade despite my pounding headache. For the first time, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then I thought about Sarah becoming a doctor, about all the lives she'd save, about how proud I'd be to see her in that white coat. Surely that was worth a few years of hardship. Surely family meant sacrifice. I opened my laptop and transferred another $300 to her account, leaving myself with negative $12 until payday. The overdraft fee would be $35 I couldn't afford, but Sarah needed that study guide. as I made myself a piece of toast for dinner. I didn't know that my sister was at that very moment at an expensive steakhouse telling her new friends about how her rich parents insisted on covering everything so she could focus on her studies. The study guide she'd asked for, she'd already bought it weeks ago with money from our parents' secret contribution, the funds they swore they didn't have, while booking their third cruise in 2 years. I was disappearing pound by pound, dollar by dollar, while building a future for someone who was already rewriting our story to erase me from it entirely. By Sarah's second year of medical school, our relationship had changed so fundamentally that I sometimes wondered if I'd imagined the close bond we'd once shared. Phone calls had become practically non-existent, and when I did manage to reach her, the conversations were painfully brief. Sarah, honey, I've called you 6 times this week, I said one November evening, finally catching her between classes. Is everything okay? God, Lula, I'm in medical school, she snapped. I don't have time to chat about your boring teacher stories. Do you have any idea how much pressure I'm under? Her words stung more than I cared to admit. I just wanted to hear your voice. It's been over a month since we talked. Well, we're talking now, aren't we? Look, I have a biochemistry exam tomorrow that's worth 30% of my grade. Was there something specific you needed? I swallowed hard. It's my birthday on Saturday. I was hoping maybe you could come home for dinner. Mom's making my favorite. Saturday? Are you serious? That's the day before my practical exam. I can't waste a whole day driving home for cake when my entire future is on the line. It's just a few hours, Sarah. You haven't been home since summer break. She let out an exaggerated sigh. This is exactly why I don't call. You and Mom always guilt-trip me about family stuff when you should be supporting my education. Isn't that what you're supposedly sacrificing for? So I can become a doctor, or was that just for show? The accusation knocked the breath out of me. That's not fair. I've never asked you for anything. You're asking now. Look, send my happy birthday wishes or whatever, but I'm not coming. I'll try to text you. The line went dead. I stood in my tiny apartment, still holding the phone, wondering when my little sister had become this cold stranger who wielded my sacrifice like a weapon against me. Saturday came and went without even a text message. Mom made excuses at dinner, explaining to the few friends who'd gathered that Sarah was so dedicated to her studies. Dad nodded along, praising her commitment. Neither of them seemed to notice that their other daughter had lost another 5 pounds and was wearing a dress from Goodwill that hung loosely on her shrinking frame. Thanksgiving followed a similar pattern. Sarah claimed she needed to stay on campus to study, though her Instagram showed her at a Friendsgiving party at someone's expensive apartment. Christmas, she arrived home for exactly 1 day, spent most of it on her phone, and left before breakfast the next morning. She's just focused, Mom defended when I mentioned Sarah's absence at New Year's Eve. Medical school isn't like your little teaching job, Lula. She can't just take breaks whenever she feels like it. The dismissive comparison hurt more than any of Sarah's rejections. My little teaching job was funding her education, but somehow that fact had been forgotten in the family narrative. By February, I developed a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. Teaching teenagers all day with a scratchy throat was torture, but I couldn't afford to take sick days. The substitute teacher pay deduction would mean missing a payment to Sarah, and I'd promised to help with her spring semester fees. Marcus cornered me in the teacher's lounge during lunch one day. Lula, that cough sounds terrible. Have you seen a doctor? It's just a cold, I rasped, sipping lukewarm tea that did nothing to soothe my throat. Wisconsin winters, you know. You've been saying that for 3 weeks, he pressed. And forgive me for being blunt, but you look like hell. When's the last time you took a real break? I tried to remember. Between teaching tutoring and weekend SAT prep courses I'd added to my schedule, I hadn't had a full day off in months. I'm fine, really. But I wasn't fine. The cough worsened, accompanied by fever and chest pain that made it hard to breathe. Still, I pushed through downing over-the-counter medication and hoping it would pass. It wasn't until I collapsed during a tutoring session at the Patel house that I finally had no choice but to seek help. Pneumonia, Dr. Reeves announced after examining my chest x-rays at the urgent care clinic. Fairly advanced, too. How long have you been ignoring these symptoms? I couldn't afford to be sick, I admitted weakly. She gave me a stern look over her glasses. Well, now you can't afford not to be. I'm prescribing antibiotics and ordering complete rest for at least a week. No work, no stress. Your body is shutting down because you've pushed it too far. The antibiotics cost $60 with my insurance. The urgent care visit was $150 after the copay. Missing a week of tutoring would cost me another $1,000 in lost income. As I lay in my Murphy bed, shivering despite the fever, I did the math and felt tears sliding down my cheeks. This illness would mean I'd have to skip meals for the next month to make Sarah's payment. On day 3 of my forced rest, Mom finally called. Not to check on me despite Marcus having contacted her about my illness, but to discuss Sarah's spring break plans. She's thinking of going to Cancun with her study group, Mom gushed. Isn't that wonderful? She works so hard, she deserves a nice vacation. Oh, Mom. I croaked, my voice barely audible. I have pneumonia. Oh, that's going around. Take some vitamin C. Anyway, Sarah mentioned she might need a little extra money for the trip. You know, for hotel and food. I told her you'd probably be happy to help since you're always so supportive. I couldn't formulate a response through my disbelief and the coughing fit that followed. Here I was, seriously ill from overwork and neglect, and my mother's only concern was funding Sarah's beach vacation. I have to go, I managed between coughs. Oh, before you go, we won't be able to make it to Easter dinner this year. We're taking a little trip ourselves. There's a spring cruise sale we couldn't pass up. After she hung up, I lay in my bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling of my studio apartment. My family was planning vacations while I was alone, sick and struggling to survive. The sacrifice that had seemed so noble 2 years ago now felt like a fool's bargain. But the real blow came that evening when Jennifer stopped by with soup and medicine. She was scrolling through her phone while I sipped the broth, and her face suddenly darkened. Well, Lula, why is your sister posting about her family's generational wealth funding her education? What? I struggled to sit up. Jennifer turned her phone toward me. There was Sarah's Instagram post featuring her and several classmates at an upscale restaurant. The caption read, "Blessed to come from a family that values education. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have parents who can fully support their dreams, but I'm grateful mine made smart financial decisions that allow me to focus solely on becoming the best doctor possible." The comments were full of praise for her accomplished family and how lucky she was to be debt-free thanks to responsible parents. "She's erasing you," Jennifer said quietly. "You're killing yourself to pay for her education, and she's telling everyone it's your parents' money." I wanted to be angry, but I was too exhausted and sick to feel anything but hollow sadness. My little sister hadn't just grown distant. She'd rewritten our entire story to exclude the person making her dreams possible. Maybe she's just embarrassed, I whispered, though I didn't believe it myself. Embarrassed of what, Eds? Of having a sister who loves her enough to sacrifice everything. Jennifer's voice was sharp with anger. Lula, this isn't right. She's not just ungrateful, she's actively lying about you. But what could I do? Confront her and risk being called jealous, demand recognition, and be labeled as seeking attention, or continue suffering in silence while she built her future on my disappearing foundation? I closed my eyes and let the fever take me back into restless sleep, where I dreamed of the sister who used to braid my hair and tell me I was her hero. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who saw my sacrifice, not as love, but as something she was entitled to receive and free to forget. The photographs arrived in my email like a slap to the face. Mom had sent them with the subject line, "Sarah's Wonderful News." with 12 exclamation points as if more punctuation could manufacture the enthusiasm I should feel. Spring of Sarah's third year had brought a development I hadn't seen coming, though perhaps I should have. Preston Wellington. Hartwell III came from the kind of old money that had buildings named after it. His great-grandfather had founded a pharmaceutical empire, his father ran a hedge fund, and his mother sat on the boards of 6 charities she never actually visited. In the photos, he stood next to Sarah at some medical school gala, his hand possessively on her waist, his smile showing teeth that had clearly benefited from the best orthodontic care money could buy. Sarah finally called me herself to share the news the first time she'd initiated contact in months. His family has a compound in the Hamptons, she gushed. Can you imagine they call it summering, like it's a verb? And his mother knows everyone. She's already introducing me to people who could help with residency placement. That's great. I managed staring at my dinner of generic mac and cheese. He seems nice. Nice, Sarah laughed, a new tinkling sound I didn't recognize. Lula, he's perfect. He's everything I've worked for. The phrase struck me oddly. Not everything I've hoped for or dreamed of, but worked for, as if Preston was an achievement to unlock rather than a person to love. I met Preston 2 months later at a family dinner Mom insisted on hosting. I'd tried to bow out claiming tutoring commitments, but Mom had actually threatened to drive to my apartment and drag me there herself. It's important we make a good impression, she'd hissed over the phone. Preston's family needs to see that Sarah comes from good people. I wanted to ask what constituted good people in her mind, but I bit my tongue and agreed to come. The dinner was at La Bernardine, a French restaurant where appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I'd worn my only remaining nice dress, a simple black sheath I'd had since college, paired with shoes I'd superglued back together that morning. Preston was already there when I arrived, sitting between Sarah and my parents, like he'd always belonged there. He stood when introduced, extending a hand with a practiced politician's smile that didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes, a cold gray blue, swept over me in assessment and clearly found me lacking. "So you're the teacher," he said, making it sound like I'd admitted to being a carnival worker. "Sarah's mentioned you." The way he said it made it clear those mentions hadn't been flattering. High school English. I confirmed, trying to maintain my dignity. I love what I do. "How noble," Preston replied, already turning his attention back to Sarah. "Not everyone can be content with such modest ambitions." The dinner proceeded with excruciating awkwardness. Preston dominated the conversation with stories about yacht clubs, golf tournaments, and family connections that could benefit Sarah's career. My parents hung on every word, laughing too loudly at his mediocre jokes and agreeing with opinions that would have horrified them from anyone with less money. When the waiter came for orders, I chose the least expensive entree, a simple pasta dish, Preston noticed. "Oh, are you vegetarian?" he asked with false concern, "or just watching your figure? Though, from the look of things, perhaps you should eat more, not less." Sarah giggled as if he'd said something clever. "Lula's always been naturally thin. So lucky, right? She can eat whatever she wants." I wanted to tell them that I looked this way because I often couldn't eat what I wanted or anything at all, but I stayed silent. My parents were beaming at their golden child and her golden boyfriend, and I was just the shadow at the edge of their shining future. The breaking point came when the check arrived. Preston made a grand show of reaching for it, insisting it was his treat. "After all," he said, looking directly at me, "I understand teachers' salaries are rather limiting. Consider this my charitable contribution for the month." My face burned with humiliation. Under the table, I dug my nails into my palms hard enough to leave marks, but the worst part was Sarah's response. "You're so thoughtful, baby," she cooed, then turned to me with a patronizing smile. "Isn't he sweet, Lula? He's always thinking about those less fortunate." Less fortunate. as if my financial situation was a matter of luck rather than the direct result of funding her education. After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Preston's true colors showed even more clearly. My ancient Honda was parked next to his pristine BMW, and he actually laughed out loud. "Is that thing even safe to drive?" he asked. "Sarah, we should follow your sister home. Make sure she doesn't break down in a bad neighborhood." "It runs fine," I said stiffly. "Still," Preston continued, "it must be embarrassing pulling up to your school in that. What do your students think?" "Oh, wait, public school kids probably have worse right." Preston," Sarah said, but she was laughing as she fake scolded him. "Be nice. Lula's car has character." If by character you mean rust and a concerning engine noise, then yes, loads of character. He wrapped an arm around Sarah. "Just promise me you'll never let my family see you getting into that thing, Lula. We have a reputation to maintain now that Sarah's part of our world." Their world, as if I existed in some completely separate universe, one that would contaminate them by association. But the moment that truly shattered my heart came as they were getting into Preston's car. I overheard their conversation through his open window as I fumbled with my keys. "Your sister is exactly what I pictured," Preston said. "No wonder you don't talk about her much." She means well," Sarah replied, and I held my breath hoping for some defense of me. "But honestly, it's embarrassing. The way she dresses that awful car, the way she kept talking about her students like teaching public school is some kind of calling. I told my study group she's a distant cousin." Smart move. My mother would have a stroke if she knew your sister was, well, that. We'll have to manage her carefully, maybe limit her involvement once we're married. Can't have her showing up to society events looking like she shops at thrift stores." Sarah laughed a bright, cruel sound. "Don't worry. Lula knows her place. She's always been good at staying in the background. That's kind of her thing, being invisible." I stood frozen beside my car keys, cutting into my palm where I gripped them too tightly. Being invisible. Is that what she thought I was doing? Being invisible while I worked myself to death to pay for the education that allowed her to enter Preston's world. As they drove away in Preston's BMW, I sat in my rusty Honda and finally let the tears fall. My little sister hadn't just grown away from me. She'd become someone who was actively ashamed of my existence. And worse, she'd chosen a partner who encouraged that shame, who saw me as a liability to be managed rather than a person who loved Sarah enough to sacrifice everything. The check engine light flickered on as I started the car, a repair I couldn't afford glaring at me in orange warning. I drove home carefully, Preston's mocking laughter echoing in my ears, Sarah's betrayal cutting deeper than any stranger's cruelty ever could. That night, I made a decision that had been building for months. I pulled out an old notebook and began documenting everything, every payment, every sacrifice, every cruel word and dismissal. I didn't know what I'd do with this record yet, but somehow I knew I'd need it. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Thanks for coming tonight. Preston thinks you're sweet. Maybe we can help you with a makeover sometime, XOXO." I turned off my phone without responding and continued writing. If being invisible was my thing, then I'd document everything from the shadows, every check, every slight, every moment of this journey. Preston might have been born into his world, but Sarah had bought her entry with my life. The price of that ticket was written in every line of my tired face, every dollar in my empty bank account, every dream I deferred so she could chase hers. But even then, in my anger and hurt, I couldn't stop the payments. The check for $9,000 would clear from my account on Monday like clockwork, because despite everything, she was still my sister and I'd made a promise. I just hadn't realized that promises only bind the person who keeps them. Sarah's final year of medical school began with a phone call that would push me past my breaking point. It was a sweltering August afternoon, and I was preparing lesson plans for the upcoming school year when her name appeared on my phone screen. "Lula, I need to talk to you about something important," she said without preamble. "No hello, no asking how I was doing." What's wrong? I asked, immediately concerned despite everything. Nothing's wrong. Everything's actually perfect. I've been accepted into the preliminary selection for the cardiology residency program at Mount Sinai. Do you know how competitive that is? Only 12 spots for over 300 applicants? That's wonderful, Sarah. Congratulations. Yeah, well, here's the thing. The application process is expensive, like really expensive. There are interview travels, wardrobe requirements, board exam prep courses, and application fees for multiple programs as backups. Preston's father says I should apply to at least 15 programs to be safe. I felt my stomach tightening. How expensive are we talking? About 18,000 total. I know it's a lot on top of the regular tuition support, but think about it as an investment. Cardiology fellows at Mount Sinai start at 200,000 a year. I'll be able to pay you back in no time. 18,000. She might as well have asked for the moon. I looked around my studio apartment at the same four walls I'd been staring at for years, at the hot plate where I cooked the same cheap meals, at the mattress on the floor, because the Murphy bed mechanism had broken months ago. Sarah, I don't have that kind of money. I'm already giving you everything I can. Can't you get a loan or maybe work more hours? I mean, teachers get the whole summer off, right? The casual ignorance of her suggestion made my hands shake. She had no idea I'd been teaching summer school and tutoring 7 days a week, or that my time off was spent working other jobs to afford her payments. I'm already working as much as humanly possible, I said quietly. Well, figure something out, she snapped. This is my future we're talking about. Do you want me to end up at some mediocre program because you couldn't make a few sacrifices, God Lula? Sometimes I think you don't actually want me to succeed. The accusation was so unfair, so blindingly cruel that I couldn't speak for a moment. When I finally found my voice, it was hollow. I'll see what I can do. I knew you would. Oh, and I need the first 5,000 by next month for the prep course. Thanks, sis. She hung up before I could respond. That weekend, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I took a second job at a 24-hour grocery store stocking shelves from 10 at night until 4 in the morning. It meant sleeping only 3 hours before heading to school, but the extra $400 a week would help cover Sarah's new demands. Marcus noticed the change immediately. Lula, you're falling asleep standing up. What's going on? Just some extra tutoring. I lied, gripping my coffee cup like a lifeline. This isn't sustainable. You're going to make yourself sick again. He was right, of course. By October, I was running on pure adrenaline and caffeine. My hands shook constantly. I developed a stress rash that wouldn't go away, and I'd started making mistakes in class that I'd never made before. Simple things like forgetting students' names or losing my train of thought mid-sentence. The breaking point came on a cold November night. I was stocking frozen foods, my body on autopilot, when suddenly the world tilted sideways. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor surrounded by concerned faces and scattered bags of frozen peas. Don't move, someone was saying. The ambulance is on its way. No, I tried to protest. Can't afford. But the darkness pulled me under before I could finish. I woke up in a hospital bed with Dr. Martinez, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, reviewing my chart with a frown. Ms. Thompson, you collapsed from severe exhaustion and dehydration, but that's just the immediate issue. Your blood work shows multiple vitamin deficiencies, your blood pressure is dangerously low, and you're showing early signs of stress-induced cardiomyopathy. What's that? I asked weakly. In layman's terms, your heart is suffering from chronic stress. You're 32 years old, but your body is showing the wear of someone decades older. When's the last time you had a proper medical checkup? I tried to remember. It had been at least 4 years, maybe 5. I've been busy, I mumbled. Dr. Martinez sat on the edge of my bed, her expression serious but compassionate. I see this too often. Let me guess, you're working multiple jobs, not eating properly, not sleeping enough. What I don't understand is why. You're a teacher with good health insurance. What's driving you to this point? Maybe it was the exhaustion or the kind way she asked, but I found myself telling her everything about Sarah, the payments, the sacrifices, the second job, all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Your sister is in medical school. I nodded. And she has no idea what this is doing to your health. She's busy. I defended automatically. Medical school is demanding. I went to medical school, Dr. Martinez said dryly. I also waited tables to help pay for it. But I never would have let someone I love destroy themselves for my benefit. This isn't just unhealthy, Ms. Thompson. It's abuse. The word hit me like a physical blow. She's my sister. Family helps family. Family doesn't consume family, she countered. You need surgery to repair a hernia. You've been ignoring treatment for severe anemia and immediate lifestyle changes. If you keep this up, you won't live to see your sister graduate, much less practice medicine. She left me with those words echoing in my head. That night, as nurses came in to check my vitals and administer IV fluids, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how I'd gotten here. When had love become self-destruction? When had sacrifice become survival? My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Where's the November payment? It's 3 days late. This is really unprofessional, Lula. No concern about why it might be late. No question about my well-being, just demands and criticism. With trembling fingers, I typed back, I'm in the hospital. Her response came quickly. Oh no, is it serious? Will the payment be delayed long? Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? Not, I'm coming to see you. Just concern about the money. I turned off my phone and closed my eyes, Dr. Martinez's words playing on repeat. Family doesn't consume family, but mine was consuming me bite by bite, dollar by dollar, until there would be nothing left but bones and regret. The hospital bill would be another burden I couldn't carry. The surgery I needed would mean weeks off work. The medications would cost hundreds each month, but as I lay there, something shifted inside me. For the first time in 4 years, I wondered what would happen if I simply stopped. What if I chose myself for once? What if Sarah had to face the consequences of her choices without my body as a bridge? The thought was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. But first, I had to survive this night and the next, and somehow find the strength to save myself the way I tried to save her. Outside my window, snow began to fall, covering the city in white like a clean slate. Maybe it was time to write a new story, one where the protagonist didn't sacrifice herself for people who saw her suffering as their birthright. But knowing something needs to change and actually changing it are two different battles. And I was so very, very tired of fighting. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in March, just as I was returning from my follow-up appointment with Dr. Martinez. My recovery from surgery had taken longer than expected, and the medical bills had decimated what little savings I'd managed to accumulate. I was back to teaching, but had to give up the overnight stocking job on doctor's orders. The envelope was thick, cream-colored cardstock with elegant calligraphy addressing. Inside the invitation itself was a work of art, embossed letters announcing Sarah Rebecca Thompson's graduation from Whitmore Medical School, followed by reception details at the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel. A smaller note was tucked inside, written in Sarah's increasingly unfamiliar handwriting. Lula, I'm sure you'll want to attend the ceremony, but the reception is more of a professional networking event. Preston's family will be hosting some important people, and we need to keep the guest list focused on those who can advance my career. I'm sure you understand. Maybe we can do a family dinner another time. S. I read the note 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. After 6 years of sacrifice, after pouring my life into her education, I was being told I wasn't suitable for her celebration. I was good enough to fund her dreams, but not good enough to celebrate them. Jennifer found me sitting on my apartment floor an hour later, still holding the invitation. She'd been checking on me regularly since my hospitalization, bringing groceries and making sure I was taking my medications. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately concerned. I wordlessly handed her the invitation and note. Her face darkened as she read, and when she finished, she carefully set the papers aside and sat down beside me. "That's it," she said quietly. "This has gone too far. She's not just ungrateful, she's deliberately cruel." Maybe she's right," I said numbly. "I wouldn't fit in with Preston's family and their important friends. I'd probably embarrass her with my clearance rack dress and scuffed shoes." Stop that right now," Jennifer said fiercely. "You've given everything for her. You've literally made yourself sick funding her education. If she's embarrassed by you, that's her character flaw, not yours." "I still have to go," I said, "to the ceremony at least. I need to see this through." Jennifer studied me carefully. "Okay, but we're gonna do this right. You're not showing up looking like you've been through hell even if you have. Consider it my graduation gift to you." "I'm not the one graduating." "No," she agreed, "but you're graduating from something, from being used, from being invisible, from accepting crumbs of recognition for a feast of sacrifice." That weekend, Jennifer took charge. She dragged me to a department store where she expertly navigated sales and coupons to find a beautiful navy dress that actually fit my too thin frame properly, new shoes that didn't pinch or show wear, a professional haircut that made me look less like I'd been cutting my own hair for 3 years, which I had. "Now," she said as we sat in her apartment the night before graduation, "we need to talk about something else. Documentation." She pulled out a thick folder I recognized as the papers I'd asked her to keep over the years, every payment record, every bank transfer, every email and text where Sarah promised to pay me back. "I've been thinking," Jennifer continued, "as your friend, I want you to just walk away and heal. As a lawyer, I'm telling you that you have grounds for a civil suit. These aren't gifts, they're loans." She's acknowledged the debt multiple times in writing. "She's my sister," I protested weakly. "No," Jennifer corrected. "She's someone who shares DNA with you. A sister wouldn't treat you this way, but I'm not pushing. I just want you to know your options. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Other times it's getting what you're owed." The morning of graduation dawned bright and clear. I put on my new dress, applied makeup to hide the lingering dark circles, and drove my rattling Honda to the Whitmore campus. The parking lot was full of luxury cars and proud families. I found my parents near the entrance, Mom resplendent in a new dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Oh, Lula," she said, barely glancing at me. "I wasn't sure you'd make it. Did you see the invitation about the reception? Such a shame you can't come, but Sarah explained it's really for medical professionals only." "I saw," I said quietly. Dad at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "You look nice," he offered. "Thanks." We found our seats in the auditorium, and I couldn't help but notice I wasn't seated with my parents. They were in the section reserved for immediate family, while I'd been placed several rows back in general admission. Another small cruelty that shouldn't have surprised me, but did. The ceremony was beautiful and interminable. When Sarah walked across the stage to receive her diploma, my parents stood and cheered. I clapped politely, feeling like a stranger watching someone else's family celebration. It wasn't until we were filing out that I was approached by someone unexpected. Dr. Martinez, dressed in academic regalia, appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Thompson, I didn't know you had a family member graduating today." "My sister," I said, gesturing towards Sarah, who was posing for photos with Preston and his perfectly coiffed family. Dr. Martinez followed my gaze, and I saw recognition dawn in her eyes. "Sarah Thompson is your sister, the one who—" "Yes," I confirmed quietly. She looked at me with a mixture of compassion and something else, possibly anger. "I see. And how are you feeling?" "You look much better than when I last saw you." "I'm managing, thank you." She glanced around, then leaned closer. "I hope you know that what you did was extraordinary. Not many people would make such sacrifices. I also hope you know that you deserve better than this." She gestured subtly toward where Sarah was laughing with friends, pointedly ignoring my presence. Before I could respond, she squeezed my shoulder gently and moved away. But her words stayed with me as I watched my sister celebrate without me. The moment that would be burned into my memory forever came as the families were organizing for photos. The photographer was arranging group shots, calling for the Thompson family. My parents immediately moved forward, and I started to follow when Sarah's voice cut through the chatter. "Oh, just immediate family for this one," she called out, not even looking at me. "Lula, maybe you could take some candids with my phone." The photographer looked confused. "Is she not your sister?" Sarah laughed that tinkling fake sound she'd perfected. "She is, but she's more like extended family. We keep the formal photos small. You know how it is." I stood frozen, her phone heavy in my hand, as she posed with our parents like I didn't exist, like I hadn't spent 6 years bleeding myself dry for this moment. Preston smirked at me over Sarah's shoulder, clearly enjoying my humiliation. Extended family, after everything I'd been relegated to the status of a distant cousin, useful for operating a camera but not worthy of being in the picture. I took their photos with steady hands, though my heart was shattering. Each click of the camera was another nail in the coffin of our relationship. When I handed the phone back, Sarah barely glanced at me. "Thanks, we're heading to the reception now. Thanks for coming to the ceremony part." She said it cheerfully, as if she'd done me a favor by allowing me to watch from the shadows. As if my presence was a gift she'd granted rather than a right I'd earned with blood, sweat, and tears. "Of course," I heard myself say. "Congratulations, Sarah, I'm proud of you." For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt recognition. But then Preston called her name and she turned away without another word. I walked to my car alone, passing happy families, taking pictures, proud parents crying with joy, siblings hugging and laughing. None of them knew that the thin woman in the navy dress had paid for her sister's dreams with pieces of her own life. None of them saw the invisible sacrifice walking among them. As I sat in my car watching other families stream toward the reception I wasn't welcome to attend, I made a decision. Jennifer was right. I had graduated today, just not from medical school. I'd graduated from being a doormat, from accepting erasure as the price of love, from believing that family meant allowing yourself to be consumed. I drove home, changed out of my dress, and did something I'd never done before. I called Jennifer. "How did it go?" she asked. "I'm ready," I said simply, "to look at those options we discussed. All of them." "Good," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Come over. We have plans to make." As I drove to her apartment, I passed a billboard advertising Whitmore Medical School with smiling students in white coats. "Where dreams become reality," it proclaimed. Yes, I thought. Dreams did become reality there, but nightmares did too, and it was time to wake up from mine. The grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel was everything I'd imagined and more. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables dressed in crisp white linens, centerpieces of roses and baby's breath, adding elegant touches to each setting. I stood just inside the entrance, having walked past the registration table where my name was conspicuously absent from the guest list. "I'm sorry," the young woman manning the table had said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I don't see a Lula Thompson here. Are you sure you're at the right event?" "I'm sure," I'd replied calmly, then simply walked past her into the ballroom before she could protest. The room was full of Whitmore's medical elite, distinguished professors, successful alumni, wealthy donors, and of course the newly graduated doctors with their proud families. I spotted my parents at a table near the front, seated with Preston's family. My mother was laughing too loudly at something Preston's mother had said, trying so hard to fit into this world she thought Sarah had earned through merit alone. Sarah stood near the bar, resplendent in a designer cocktail dress that probably cost more than 3 of my monthly payments to her. Preston was beside her, one hand possessively on her waist as they chatted with what looked like hospital administrators. She was glowing with success and champagne every inch the sophisticated young doctor she'd worked so hard to become. No, I corrected myself, that I'd worked so hard for her to become. I'd made it halfway across the room when Sarah spotted me. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. She whispered urgently to Preston, whose expression shifted from confusion to irritation as he followed her gaze to me. They intercepted me near the dance floor, Sarah's smile fixed and brittle as she gripped my arm. "Lula, what are you doing here? I specifically told you the reception was invitation only." "I know," I said pleasantly. "I decided to come anyway. After all, I've invested quite a bit in this celebration." Preston stepped closer, using his height to try to intimidate me. "This is a private event. You need to leave before you embarrass yourself." "Embarrass myself," I repeated, my voice carrying further than I'd intended. Several nearby conversations paused. How exactly would I do that, Preston? By existing, by being the sister who paid for all this. "Keep your voice down," Sarah hissed, her nails digging into my arm. "You're making a scene." "Am I?" I looked around at the growing number of people watching our interaction. I thought I was just trying to congratulate my sister on her graduation. The graduation I paid $9,000 a year for. Every year. For 6 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling in real time, and the panic in her eyes was almost painful to witness. "Lula, please," she whispered. "Not here. Not in front of..." In front of who? Sarah. The important people. The ones who think your parents paid for your education. The ones who have no idea your teacher sister worked herself into the hospital to fund your dreams. My mother appeared at my elbow, her face flushed with anger and champagne. "Lula Thompson, you stop this right now. How dare you come here and ruin Sarah's special day with your jealousy?" Jealousy. The word came out as half laugh, half sob. "Is that what you think this is?" "You've always been envious of your sister's success," Mom continued, playing to the growing audience. "Just because you chose a mediocre career doesn't mean you can tear down someone who aimed higher." "She aimed higher with my money," I said clearly, "with my health, with my life. And now she's too ashamed to even acknowledge I exist." "Your job is done," Sarah said suddenly, her voice cold and steady. The mask had dropped completely now. "I needed help, you provided it. That's what family does. But this..." She gestured around the elegant room. "This isn't your world, Lula. It never was and never will be." "You don't know your place," my mother added with a cruel laugh. "You're a teacher. She's a doctor. The help doesn't sit at the table with the guests." The help. There it was, finally out in the open. Not daughter, not sister, not family. The help. I looked between them, my mother and sister, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. The contempt in their eyes wasn't new. It had always been there, hidden under false gratitude and family obligation. I'd just been too desperate to believe I was loved to see it. "You're right," I said quietly. "This isn't my world. It never was." I turned to leave dignity intact, despite the trembling in my hands, but as I walked away, I heard Dr. Martinez's voice cut through the murmur of shocked conversations. "Ms. Thompson, wait." I paused as she approached, still in her academic regalia from the ceremony. She'd clearly witnessed the entire confrontation. "I want to make sure I understand this correctly," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding a room. "You're the sister who's been funding Sarah's medical education." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Dr. Martinez turned to Sarah, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes hard. "And you felt it appropriate to exclude her from your celebration, to treat her as, what was the phrase, the help?" Sarah lifted her chin defiantly. "This is a family matter. It doesn't concern..." "I'm the chief of staff at Riverside General. Dr. Martinez interrupted smoothly. I'm also on the board of directors for 3 other hospitals in the state. I make it my business to know the character of doctors we're considering for residency positions. The blood drained from Sarah's face for the second time that evening. What character matters in medicine? Dr. Martinez continued her gaze, now including Preston and my parents. How someone treats those who sacrifice them for them speaks volumes about how they'll treat patients, nurses, support staff. If Dr. Thompson here is willing to publicly humiliate the person who made her career possible, what does that say about her ethics, her empathy, her basic human decency? She turned back to me. I hope you know your worth, Ms. Thompson. It's clear your family doesn't, but I do. The medical profession could use more people with your kind of dedication and selflessness. With that, she swept away, leaving devastation in her wake. Sarah was stammering, trying to explain to the growing circle of listeners, but the damage was done. I could see it in the way her classmates looked at her now, the way Preston's parents exchanged glances, the way the hospital administrators she'd been courting stepped back. I didn't stay to watch the rest of her world implode. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high, past the confused registration table, through the lobby where other late arrivals were heading in to celebrate. Outside, the spring evening was cool and clear. I sat on a bench in the hotel's garden, finally allowing the tears to fall. Not tears of sadness or regret, but of relief. The mask was off. The truth was out. I was free. My phone buzzed with texts, undoubtedly from Sarah or my parents, but I didn't look. Instead, I called Jennifer. It's done, I said when she answered. The whole ugly truth is out. Good, she said firmly. Now come over. We have a letter to draft to Sarah about repayment. And Lula, I'm proud of you. Standing up to them took incredible courage. As I drove away from the hotel, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror. Despite everything, despite the tears and exhaustion and public humiliation, I looked more like myself than I had in years. The weight of carrying their secrets, their lies, their false gratitude had finally been lifted. Sarah had been right about one thing: my job was done, but not in the way she'd meant. My job of enabling their cruelty, of accepting erasure as the price of family, of shrinking myself to make them comfortable with their own selfishness. That job was finally blessedly done. What came next would be harder lawyers and demands for repayment, family relationships, permanently severed, a future rebuilt from the scorched earth they'd left behind. But as I drove toward Jennifer's apartment and whatever came next, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 6 long years. Hope. My hands were still shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, navigating the familiar streets between the Whitmore Hotel and Jennifer's apartment. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that went bone deep. 6 years of sacrifice, of silence, of shrinking myself to fit into the margins of their lives, and it had all come down to those few minutes in a ballroom full of strangers. I pulled over at a rest stop halfway to Jennifer's, unable to see through the tears that finally came. Not the dignified tears I'd allowed myself in the hotel garden, but body-shaking sobs that felt like they were being pulled from somewhere primal. I cried for the young woman I'd been so eager to help her sister achieve her dreams. I cried for every meal I'd skipped, every health issue I'd ignored, every opportunity I'd passed up. I cried for the relationship with my sister that had probably never truly existed outside my own desperate imagination. My phone, thrown haphazardly on the passenger seat, lit up with call after call. Sarah, Mom, Dad, even Preston. Though I couldn't imagine what he possibly had to say to me, I let them all go to voicemail, creating a symphony of rejection that felt like poetic justice. When the tears finally subsided, I sat in that rest stop parking lot watching normal families come and go. A mother helped her daughter with a scraped knee. A father carried his sleeping toddler to the car. Simple acts of love and care that didn't come with price tags or conditions. My phone rang again, but this time it was a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ms. Thompson, this is Robert Chen from the Riverside School District. My heart sank. Had word of the scene at the hotel already reached my employer somehow? Yes, Mr. Chen. I apologize for calling so late, but I wanted to catch you before Monday. We've been reviewing applications for the principal position at Washington High, and your name keeps coming up in recommendations. Marcus Webb spoke particularly highly of your dedication and innovative teaching methods. I blinked, trying to process this unexpected turn. The principal position. Yes, I know you haven't formally applied, but we'd like to invite you to interview. The position comes with a significant salary increase, full administrative benefits, and the opportunity to implement some of the educational programs you've been advocating for. Are you interested? Interested. 6 months ago, I would have dismissed the idea immediately, too focused on maintaining my grueling schedule to even consider advancement. But now? Yes, I heard myself say. Yes, I'm very interested. Excellent. My assistant will call Monday to schedule the interview, and Ms. Thompson, between you and me, you're our top candidate. Your colleagues speak of you with remarkable respect, especially given what Marcus tells me you've been managing personally while maintaining your professional excellence. After he hung up, I sat in stunned silence. A door was opening just as another had slammed shut. The timing felt surreal, like the universe offering a small compensation for years of hardship. I started the car and continued to Jennifer's apartment, feeling lighter with each mile. By the time I reached her building, the frantic calls had stopped, replaced by text messages I didn't bother to read. Jennifer was waiting at her door with a glass of wine and a legal pad. "Tell me everything," she said, ushering me inside. I recounted the entire scene from walking past the registration table to Dr. Martinez's devastating intervention. Jennifer's expression shifted between outrage, pride, and professional interest as I spoke. "Dr. Martinez is a gift," she said when I finished. "A witness of her caliber will be invaluable if this goes to court. But first, let me show you what I've prepared." She pulled out a formal demand letter she'd drafted. It was thorough and devastating, documenting every payment over 6 years, with interest calculated totaling over $70,000 when accounting for the personal loans I'd taken to cover Sarah's extra expenses and the interest accrued. "This goes out Monday," Jennifer said. "Certified mail to Sarah with copies to your parents since they were complicit. She has 30 days to respond with a payment plan or we file suit." "She'll never pay," I said quietly. "She'll claim they were gifts." Jennifer smiled, pulling out another folder. "Remember all those texts and emails you've been sending me over the years, the ones where she promises to pay you back, where she acknowledges the money as loans, where your parents admit they could have helped but chose not to. Those aren't suggestions of gifts, Lula. They're admissions of debt." I fingered the stack of printed evidence, seeing my pain cataloged in black and white. Each message a small betrayal I'd swallowed at the time, now transformed into ammunition for justice. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "I did some digging. Those cruises your parents took, they've been on 12 in the last 6 years. Total cost over $100,000. They had money, Lula. They just valued their comfort over your well-being." The numbers were staggering. While I'd been living on ramen and skipping medical care, my parents had been sailing the Mediterranean and Caribbean, posting photos on social media about their well-deserved retirement adventures. "There's something else," I said, remembering the phone call. "I just got invited to interview for a principal position." Jennifer's face lit up. "Lula, that's amazing. See, the universe is already course-correcting. You're going to rebuild better than before." We spent the next hour refining the demand letter and discussing strategy. Jennifer explained the legal process, what to expect if Sarah contested the claim, how to handle any attempts at manipulation from my family. She was thorough and protective, the sister I'd chosen, rather than the one I'd been born with. As I prepared to leave, she handed me one more document. "What's this?" A restraining order template, she said gently. I'm not saying you'll need it, but after that scene tonight, your family might escalate. If they show up at your work or home, if they harass you, we'll be ready. The thought that I might need legal protection from my own family should have been devastating. Instead, it felt like armor protecting the new life I was building from the toxicity of the old. My phone buzzed with another message as I walked to my car. This time, I looked. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Thompson, this is Grace Chen, one of Sarah's classmates. I wanted you to know that what happened tonight opened a lot of eyes. My brother paid for my education too, and I've never forgotten that sacrifice. Your sister should be ashamed. You deserve so much better. I sat in my car reading and rereading the message. A stranger's kindness where family had shown cruelty. It was a reminder that chosen connections often ran deeper than blood. The drive back to my small apartment felt different this time. The shabby building didn't look like failure anymore. It looked like evidence of love, even if that love had been misdirected. The cramped studio wasn't a prison. It was about to become a launching pad for something better. Inside, I did something I hadn't done in years. I ordered takeout from a nice restaurant, not caring about the cost. As I ate pad thai that wasn't from a discount grocery store, I made a list of all the things I'd start doing once the financial bleeding stopped. Visit a dentist, buy clothes that fit, take a vacation. Simple things that had become impossible luxuries. My phone continued buzzing with messages I didn't read. Let them panic. Let them realize what they'd lost. For the first time in 6 years, their crisis wasn't my problem to solve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The interview to prepare for the legal letter to send the inevitable family explosion to weather. But tonight, in my tiny apartment with good food and hope for the future, I felt richer than I had since this all began. The woman who'd driven to that hotel had been broken by sacrifice. The one who'd driven away was forged by fire, ready to rise from the ashes they'd made of her life. Sarah had been right about one thing at the graduation. My job was done. The job of being their victim, their stepping stone, their willing sacrifice. Now it was time for a new job, building a life where my worth wasn't measured in what I could give away, but in who I chose to become. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything feel sharper, more real. I dressed in my best teaching outfit, the one I'd saved for parent conferences and important meetings, and arrived at school 30 minutes early. The building was quiet, just me and the custodial staff, who nodded their familiar good mornings as I made my way to my classroom. On my desk was a bouquet of flowers and a card signed by my students. Thank you for never giving up on us, Ms. T. I didn't know how they'd heard about my situation, but teenagers had their ways. The gesture made my eyes water as I prepared for the day ahead. At exactly 8:15, I walked into Principal Morrison's office with my completed application for the principal position. He looked up from his computer, surprise flickering across his weathered face. Lula, I heard you might be interested. Honestly, I was hoping you'd apply years ago, but Marcus mentioned you had family obligations. Those obligations have recently concluded, I said, carefully handing him the paperwork. He glanced through it, nodding approvingly. Your qualifications are impressive. The literacy program you developed increased our reading scores by 30%. The after-school tutoring initiative you volunteer for has helped dozens of at-risk kids graduate. And your colleagues universally respect you, which is no small feat in education. Thank you, sir. The interview committee will want to meet with you Thursday. Between us, I think you're exactly what Washington High needs. That school has been struggling, but someone with your dedication and innovative approaches could turn it around. He paused, studying me with paternal concern. You look good, Lula. Healthier. Whatever changes you've made, keep making them. The morning classes passed in a blur of normalcy that felt almost surreal after the weekend's drama. My students were discussing The Great Gatsby, debating whether Daisy was villain or victim, and I found myself contributing with more passion than I'd had in years. Sometimes, I said as they analyzed Daisy's choices, people get so caught up in maintaining their comfortable illusions that they're willing to let others pay the price. The question is whether we excuse that because it's human nature or hold people accountable for the damage they cause. Malik, one of my brightest students, raised his hand. But Miss T, what about family? Like, doesn't Daisy owe Tom something just because they're married? Relationships, even family ones, should be reciprocal. I answered carefully. When one person is always taking and the other is always giving, that's not love. That's exploitation. The class nodded thoughtfully, and I realized I was teaching myself as much as them. During lunch, I sat with Jennifer in her car as she showed me the certified mail receipts. The letters had been sent to Sarah, our parents, and even Preston, who Jennifer had discovered had been benefiting from what he thought was Sarah's family money for expensive dinners and vacation planning. They'll receive them by Wednesday, she said. Then the clock starts ticking. What if they try to contact me at school? Document everything. Save every voicemail, every email, every text. If they show up in person, have security escort them out and call me immediately. She handed me a small recorder. Keep this with you. Wisconsin is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. After school, I had 2 tutoring sessions scheduled, but both families had texted to cancel. Word was spreading through our small community like wildfire. I used the unexpected free time to work on my interview presentation for Thursday, outlining my vision for turning around Washington High. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. My automatic transfer to Sarah, the one I'd set up 6 years ago, had been canceled. The $9,000 that would have left my account today was still there. It was strange seeing a balance that wasn't immediately spoken for. I was deep in preparation when someone knocked on my classroom door. Marcus stood there with 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting a cup on my desk. "The whole school's buzzing about you applying for the Washington job." Word travels fast. He settled into a student desk, his long frame comically folded into the small seat. "Jennifer called me yesterday, gave me the broad strokes of what happened. I'm sorry, Lula. No one should go through that, especially from family. You recommended me for the position. Are you kidding? I've been singing your praises to anyone who'd listen for 3 years. You're the best teacher in this building, and you'd make an incredible principal. I just wish you'd been able to pursue it sooner." I wasn't ready sooner, I admitted. I was too busy trying to be everything to everyone else. And now I'm ready to be something for myself. We worked together for another hour, Marcus offering insights about Washington High's challenges and helping me refine my proposal. As we packed up, he paused at the door. "You know the kids started a collection right for you." I blinked in confusion. "A collection?" "They heard about your situation. Not the details, but enough. They want to help the teacher who's always helped them. It's not much, mostly dollar bills and change, but Malik Washington is organizing it. Kids got a future in activism." I had to sit down, overwhelmed by the gesture. These teenagers, many from struggling families themselves, wanted to help me. The irony wasn't lost children offering more support than my own family ever had. That evening, I arrived home to find an expensive car parked outside my building. Preston leaned against it, his usual swagger replaced by something harder to read. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "No, we don't," I replied, walking past him toward my door. "I'll pay you," he called out, stopping me in my tracks. "The full amount Sarah owes. 70,000 cash transferred by Friday." I turned slowly. "In exchange for..." "You drop the legal action, sign a non-disclosure agreement about the financial arrangements, delete any social media posts about the situation, basically disappear from Sarah's life completely and permanently." "She's my sister." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is she? Because from where I'm standing, you were just an ATM she used for 6 years. I'm offering you a clean break and full compensation. Take it." "Wait," I asked, genuinely curious. "Why do you care?" Because Sarah's residency at Mount Sinai is in jeopardy thanks to your little scene. Dr. Martinez has connections everywhere and she's been talking. The only way to salvage Sarah's reputation is to make this go away quietly. My family's reputation is also at stake. We don't associate with scandal. So you want to buy my silence to protect your image? I want to solve a problem efficiently, he corrected. You get your money back, plus interest. Sarah gets her career. Everyone wins. I studied him. This man who thought everything could be purchased, everyone could be bought. 6 months ago, desperate and exhausted, I might have taken his offer. But the woman who'd walked out of that ballroom wasn't for sale anymore. No, I said simply. Your money comes with strings. I want what I'm owed, but I want it through proper channels, with accountability, with Sarah understanding what she cost me. His face darkened. You're making a mistake. We could make things difficult for you. More difficult than working myself into the hospital, more difficult than being told I'm the help at my sister's graduation. I pulled out the recorder Jennifer had given me, making sure he saw it. Are you threatening me, Preston? Because that would be unfortunate for someone concerned about reputation. He straightened, adjusting his expensive suit. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is not standing up for myself sooner. Now get off my property before I call the police. As his car peeled away, I felt another chain break. They'd tried to buy my silence to purchase my erasure from their lives, but some things couldn't be bought, and my dignity was finally one of them. Inside my apartment, I found a box outside my door with a note, from your English lit kids, we believe in you, Malik and class. The box contained hundreds of dollars in small bills change and even a few checks from parents. But more than the money were the notes. Dozens of them telling me how I'd changed their lives, helped them believe in themselves, never gave up on them, even when they'd given up on themselves. I sat on my floor, surrounded by these testaments to the life I'd built despite everything, and cried. But these weren't tears of pain or exhaustion. They were tears of recognition, of finally seeing my own worth reflected back at me through the eyes of people who truly mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Preston told me about your conversation. You're destroying my life out of jealousy. I hope you're happy. I deleted it without responding. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I blocked her number, then our parents' numbers, then Preston's. The silence that followed felt like freedom. Thursday's interview loomed full of possibility. The legal letters would arrive to their recipients Wednesday, starting a clock I no longer feared. My students' collection would go toward the new professional wardrobe I'd need as a principal. For the first time in 6 years, my life was my own. The price had been astronomical, paid in pounds of flesh and rivers of tears. But as I prepared my materials for the interview, as I planned a future that centered my own dreams instead of someone else's, I knew the cost of freedom was worth every penny. The woman who'd started this journey would have called family priceless. The one ending it knew better. Family that demanded everything while giving nothing wasn't priceless. It was worthless. Wednesday morning arrived with an explosion of chaos that I'd been bracing for since Monday. At 6:45, just as I was getting ready for work, my superintendent called. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Ms. Thompson, I've just received 17 calls since 6 a.m. from someone claiming to be your sister. She's demanding to speak with you and threatening to show up at the school. What's going on? My stomach clenched. I apologize, Mr. Davidson. There's a family legal matter, and I've had to block their numbers for my own well-being. I had no idea she'd contact the school. She also called 3 board members whose numbers she found online. One of them is considering a restraining order. He paused. I've instructed security to deny her access to the building, document everything, and keep me informed. We support our teachers here, but this cannot interfere with the educational environment. Understood. It won't happen again. But I knew Sarah better than that. When one door closed, she'd kick down another. I arrived at school to find Marcus waiting by my classroom with a security guard. She showed up 20 minutes ago, Marcus said quietly. Made quite a scene in the parking lot before security escorted her off property. Jim here has it all on camera. Jim, the security guard, nodded grimly. Ma'am, I've seen a lot in my 20 years here, but that woman, she was screaming about you ruining her life, demanding to know what kind of lies you've been spreading. When I wouldn't let her in, she tried to push past me. That's assault. You want me to file a police report? Not yet, I said, though my hands were shaking. Just keep the footage safe, please. My first period students were unusually quiet when they filed in, and I knew they'd witnessed at least part of Sarah's performance. Malik approached my desk hesitantly. Ms. T, was that lady really your sister? Unfortunately, yes. Man, he shook his head. And I thought my family drama was bad. You need us to walk you to your car after school. The protective offer from a 16-year-old made me smile despite everything. I'll be okay, Malik, but thank you. During my prep period, Jennifer called. Brace yourself. They got the letters. I know, Sarah already made a scene at school. That's just the beginning. Your parents have been calling my office nonstop. My secretary is ready to quit. And Preston, he hired Robert Sterling. I recognized the name. Sterling was the kind of lawyer who got wealthy people out of consequences. Should I be worried? No, Sterling's good, but he can't make evidence disappear. Speaking of which, Sarah's meltdown was caught on your school security cameras, right? That's perfect. Shows her instability and harassment. By lunch, word had spread throughout the school about the morning's drama. Teachers I barely knew stopped by to offer support, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and survival. The art teacher, Mrs. Chen, brought me homemade dumplings. My brother stole my inheritance when our parents died, she said quietly, told everyone I was mentally unstable and couldn't handle money. It took 5 years, but I got justice. You will too. I was reviewing my presentation materials for tomorrow's interview when my classroom phone rang. The main office rarely forwarded calls unless they were important. Lula Thompson speaking. Lula, thank God! It was my father's voice, something I hadn't heard in months. He sounded older, defeated. We need to talk. We're talking. Not over the phone, in person. Please, sweetheart, this has gone too far. Your mother, she's not well. This stress is killing her. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Mom seemed perfectly fine laughing at me during Sarah's graduation. We didn't mean, look, just come to dinner tonight. We can sort this out like a family. We haven't been a family for a long time, I said quietly. Maybe we never were. Don't say that. You're my daughter. Both of you are. I love you both. You have a funny way of showing it. 12 cruises, Dad. You took 12 cruises while I was skipping meals to pay for Sarah's education. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. How did you know about that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you had money. You chose to spend it on yourselves while watching me destroy my health for Sarah. That's not love. We were going to pay you back, he said desperately. Once Sarah was established, we have it all planned out. No, you don't. You have nothing planned except more excuses and more cruises. I'm done being the family sacrifice. If you contact me again outside of legal channels, I'll file harassment charges. I hung up before he could respond, my hands surprisingly steady. The afternoon brought a new development. During my last period, the principal's secretary knocked on my door looking flustered. Ms. Thompson, there's a situation in the main office. Your mother and sister are here with a lawyer. They're demanding to see you. I looked at my students, all watching with wide eyes. Continue reading Act 3. I'll be right back. In the main office, I found a scene that would have been comical if it weren't so painful. My mother sat dramatically slumped in a chair, fanning herself like a Victorian lady with the vapors. Sarah paced behind her, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, makeup smeared from crying. A man in an expensive suit stood to the side, looking deeply uncomfortable. Principal Morrison intercepted me before I could speak. They've been here 40 minutes. I've explained repeatedly that they cannot disrupt the educational environment. I'm about to call the police. That won't be necessary, the lawyer said quickly. I'm Harold Fleming representing the Thompson family. If we could just have 5 minutes. No, I said firmly. This is my place of work. If you need to communicate with me, you can do so through my attorney, Jennifer Walsh. Lula. My mother's voice was shrill. How can you do this to us? We're your family. The same family that called me the help and told me I don't know my place. I asked calmly. That family? Sarah stepped forward and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. You're going to destroy my career over petty jealousy. Dr. Martinez is telling everyone I'm unethical. Mount Sinai is reconsidering my residency. Is that what you want? What I want, I said slowly, is the $70,000 I loaned you. What I want is 6 years of my life back. What I want is to not have pneumonia from overwork while you vacation in Cancun. But we don't always get what we want. Do we? I'll have to file for bankruptcy, she wailed. Is that what you want? Your sister bankrupt before she even starts her career? You mean the career I paid for? The lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we could reach a settlement. My clients are prepared to offer. Stop, I interrupted. I've already declined Preston's offer. I don't want a settlement. I want justice, and I want you all to leave before I have you arrested for trespassing. My mother stood unsteadily. If you do this, you're no daughter of mine. The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt like liberation. I haven't been your daughter for a long time. I've been your ATM, your servant, your convenient sacrifice, but never your daughter. Security arrived, then 2 officers who gently but firmly escorted my family and their lawyer out. Through the office window, I watched them argue in the parking lot, Sarah gesturing wildly while our mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. When I returned to my classroom, my students applauded. It was inappropriate and unprofessional, and it made me cry. Oh, sorry, Malik said, but that was epic. You stood up to them? Language, Mr. Washington. I said through my tears, but I was smiling. After school, I found Jennifer waiting by my car. Heard about the floor show. Building security called me. Is it always going to be like this? No, she assured me. Extinction bursts. When people lose control, they escalate before they accept reality. Sterling called me, by the way. They want to negotiate. I told them our terms are non-negotiable, full repayment plus interest, or we go to court. Oh, what did he say? That his clients need time to consider their options. Translation, they're realizing they can't win and are scrambling for damage control. As I drove home, I noticed a car following me. My heart raced until I recognized Marcus's vehicle. He followed me all the way to my building, parking beside me. Figured you might want an escort, he said, getting out, just in case. We walked to my door together, and sure enough, Preston was waiting. But this time he wasn't alone. An older couple stood with him, their resemblance making their identity clear: his parents. Ms. Thompson. The woman spoke first. I'm Catherine Hartwell. I believe we need to discuss the situation like civilized people. There's nothing to discuss, I said, Marcus, stepping protectively closer. On the contrary, Mr. Hartwell said, our son made some poor choices regarding your sister. We've just learned about the financial arrangements. We're prepared to make this right. Preston's face was red with humiliation. Clearly, his parents had taken control of the situation. Our family values integrity, Catherine continued. We had no idea Preston was involved with someone who would treat family this way. The engagement is naturally terminated. What? The word exploded from Preston. Mother, you can't... Quiet, his father said sharply. You've embarrassed us enough. Dating a woman who defrauded her own sister. What were you thinking? I almost felt sorry for Preston as his world crumbled. Almost. We'll pay the full amount owed, Catherine said. In exchange, we'd appreciate discretion about our family's involvement. Preston was deceived as much as you were. I looked at these people so concerned with reputation and appearance and saw a different version of my own family. Ma'am, I appreciate the offer, but Sarah's debt is hers to pay. Your son's involvement is his own business. I won't sign anything that protects any of them from the consequences of their choices. Marcus coughed to hide what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Catherine's perfectly composed face tightened. You're making a mistake. We have considerable influence. Then use it to teach your son about character, I interrupted. Good evening. As they left, Preston shot me a look of pure hatred. But behind it was something else, a dawning recognition that money couldn't fix everything, that some bridges once burned stayed ash. Inside my apartment, I collapsed on my couch, exhausted but oddly exhilarated. My family had shown their true colors in spectacular fashion. Preston's family had revealed their own dysfunction. Everyone was scrambling, panicking, trying to regain control. But control had shifted. For 6 years, they'd held all the cards. Now I held truth evidence, and most importantly, self-respect they couldn't buy, bully, or beg away. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then noticed it was from a Wisconsin area code. I recognized the hospital. Ms. Thompson, this is Dr. Martinez. I heard about your interview tomorrow for the principal position. If you need a professional reference, I would be honored to provide one. You deserve every good thing coming your way. I set the phone down and looked around my small apartment. Tomorrow, I'd interview for a position that could change my life. Friday, Jennifer would file the lawsuit if Sarah didn't respond. Next week would bring new challenges and changes. But tonight, I'd survived their extinction burst. I'd stood firm against their manipulation, their wealth, their tears, and their threats. The woman who'd once folded at a harsh word had become someone who could face down an army and not blink. They'd created a warrior when all they'd wanted was a wallet. Their panic was just the beginning of understanding how badly they'd miscalculated. And I was just getting started. Thursday morning dawned with the kind of perfect spring weather that made everything seem possible. I dressed in my interview outfit, the one Jennifer had helped me choose, and arrived at Washington High School an hour early to familiarize myself with the building. The contrast to my current school was stark. Washington High clearly struggled with funding and resources, but there was potential in its bones waiting for someone to unlock it. The interview committee consisted of 5 people: the superintendent, 2 board members, a parent representative, and surprisingly, Dr. Martinez, who served on the district's advisory board. She gave me the slightest nod when I entered her presence, both comforting and nerve-wracking. Ms. Thompson, the superintendent began, your application was impressive, but we're more interested in your vision. Washington High has a 42% graduation rate. How do you change that? I opened my presentation hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. For the next hour, I laid out a comprehensive plan: mentorship programs pairing struggling students with successful seniors, partnerships with local businesses for vocational training, evening classes for parents to get their GEDs alongside their children. I spoke about creating a culture where success was expected, not exceptional. Your ideas are ambitious, one board member said, but they require funding we don't have. Actually, I said, pulling out my research, 70% of what I'm proposing can be implemented with existing resources just reallocated. The mentorship program costs nothing but organization. The parent classes can be staffed by volunteers from the local college's education program. I've already reached out to contacts who are interested. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. What makes you think you can succeed where others have failed? I thought about the easy answer, the professional answer, but something about surviving yesterday's family assault had stripped away my ability to give anything but truth. Because I understand what it's like to be written off, I said quietly, to be seen as less than. These kids at Washington High, everyone's already decided their failures. But I've spent 6 years being told I was just the help while funding someone else's dreams. I know what it feels like to be invisible and still show up every day. That's what these kids need, someone who sees them, who won't give up on them, who knows that circumstances don't define worth. The room was silent for a moment before the parent representative spoke. My son goes to Washington. He's been in trouble failing classes. Why should I believe you can reach him when no one else has... What's his name? Deshaun Williams. Does Deshaun have dreams? Things he wants beyond high school? She shifted uncomfortably. He talks about fixing cars. His uncle's a mechanic. Then that's where we start. We connect his education to his dreams. Math becomes engine calculations. English becomes writing repair estimates and customer communication. Science becomes understanding combustion and electrical systems. We don't force him into a college prep box if that's not his path. We prepare him for his life, not some standardized ideal. The questions continued for another hour, touching on everything from budget management to disciplinary philosophy. When they finally thanked me for coming, I felt drained but hopeful. "We'll be in touch early next week," the superintendent said, shaking my hand. As I gathered my materials, Dr. Martinez approached. "That was exceptional," she said quietly. "You'll hear from them sooner than Monday." I was driving back to my current school when Jennifer called. "You need to come to my office. Now." What's wrong?" "Just come. Bring any documentation you have at home about the loans to Sarah." My stomach clenched as I changed direction. At Jennifer's office, I found her assistant looking frazzled and Jennifer herself pacing her conference room. "What's happening?" Jennifer held up a thick legal filing. "Sterling filed an emergency injunction trying to block our civil suit, but that's not the interesting part. Look at this." She handed me a document that made my blood run cold. It was a complaint to the state medical board filed by concerned parties questioning Sarah's fitness to practice medicine. The complaint detailed financial fraud, misrepresentation, and most damning theft from patient charity funds during her clinical rotations. "I didn't file this," Jennifer said quickly, "but whoever did has inside information. They're alleging Sarah took money meant for patients' emergency funds, claiming she was using it for medical supplies, but actually using it for personal expenses." Who would know about that? Hospital staff, other students, someone with access who's been watching. Jennifer pulled up another document on her laptop. It gets worse. 3 other families have come forward since Saturday's graduation scene. All siblings who funded their relatives through medical school under similar circumstances. They're talking about a class action lawsuit. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. This is spiraling beyond what I intended. "You didn't cause this," Jennifer said firmly. "You just lit the match. Sarah's own actions provided the kindling." My phone buzzed with a call from my father. Against Jennifer's advice, I answered. "Lula, you have to stop this." His voice was ragged, desperate. "The medical board is investigating Sarah. She could lose her license before she even starts practicing. The hospital called. They're suspending her residency pending investigation." "I didn't file any complaint with the medical board." "But you started this. You're seen at the graduation. The lawsuit, you've destroyed her." "No," I said firmly. "Sarah destroyed herself. I just stopped enabling it." "The investigators are asking about patient funds. They're saying she stole money. That's prison, Lula. Your sister could go to prison." The weight of that hit me hard. Despite everything, the thought of Sarah in prison made me nauseous. But then I remembered Dr. Martinez's words, "Family doesn't consume family." If she stole from patients, that's her choice and her consequence. "How can you be so cold?" he cried. "We're talking about your sister." The sister who called me the help. Who told people I was a distant cousin who watched me work myself into the hospital and asked for more money. That sister. She made mistakes. Stealing from charity funds isn't a mistake, Dad. It's a crime, and I'm done protecting any of you from consequences. I hung up and found Jennifer watching me carefully. "You okay?" I don't know, I admitted. I wanted justice, not this. This is justice, she said gently. It's just messier than we imagine it'll be. Sarah made these choices. You're just the reason she's finally facing consequences. The rest of the day blurred together. Jennifer fielded calls from Sterling from reporters who'd caught wind of the story, from other families wanting to join potential litigation. I went home to find my answering machine full and my mailbox stuffed with letters from family members I hadn't heard from in years, all suddenly concerned about keeping this private. That evening, as I was heating up soup and trying to process everything, Marcus called. "Turn on Channel 6. I did, and nearly dropped my remote. Sarah was on the local news sitting beside Preston, apparently not as terminated as his parents claimed, in what was clearly a staged interview. "I'm heartbroken," Sarah was saying, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "I love my sister, despite our differences. Yes, she helped with my education, but it was a gift. Now she's trying to destroy me out of jealousy over my success." The reporter, clearly skeptical, pressed harder. "What about the allegations of stolen patient funds?" Sarah's face went white. "Those are completely false. I would never—" "We have documentation," the reporter interrupted, holding up papers. "Receipts showing charity funds withdrawn under your authorization, but no corresponding medical supplies purchased." The camera caught the moment Sarah realized this wasn't the puff piece she'd expected. Preston tried to interject, but the reporter turned on him. "Mr. Hartwell, is it true your family offered to pay Ms. Thompson to sign a non-disclosure agreement?" The interview devolved from there, with Sarah and Preston making excuses and contradicting each other while the reporter calmly presented fact after fact. It was a masterclass in investigative journalism, and it was devastating. My phone rang immediately. "Jennifer. Did you see?" "I saw. Local news picked up the story from a tip. Someone leaked the medical board complaint and the financial records. This is going nuclear." I thought about feeling guilty. I waited for the wave of family loyalty to make me want to protect Sarah. It never came. Instead, I felt free. The truth was outspreading beyond my control, and I didn't have to carry it alone anymore. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait. Sterling will probably push for a settlement hard tomorrow. The medical board will continue investigating. The prosecutors might get involved if the theft allegations prove true. And you—" she paused, "you move forward with your life." That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I ordered a pizza, a whole pizza just for me, and ate it while watching comedy shows instead of grading papers. I took a long bath with expensive bath salts Jennifer had given me for my birthday that I'd been saving for a special occasion. As I soaked in lavender-scented water, I thought about Sarah's unraveling. The golden child was falling from her pedestal in spectacular fashion, and all I'd done was stop being her safety net. The medical board investigation, the stolen funds, the public humiliation, those were all consequences of her own actions finally catching up. My phone sat silent on the bathroom counter. For the first time in 6 years, no one was calling to demand money time or pieces of my soul. The silence should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt like peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the settlement negotiations, the potential criminal investigation, the fallout from Sarah's disastrous interview. But tonight, I was just Lula Thompson eating pizza in her tiny apartment, finally understanding that justice wasn't revenge. It was simply stepping back and letting people face the consequences they'd spent years avoiding. And sometimes those consequences were more devastating than anything I could have orchestrated. The truth, it turned out, needed no embellishment. It was damning enough on its own. Friday morning brought the kind of rain that turned the world gray and reflective. I sat in Jennifer's conference room watching water streak down the windows while she reviewed the latest developments with me. Across the table sat Harold Sterling, looking far less composed than he had at my school. Beside him, Sarah slumped in her chair, her usual polish completely gone. She wouldn't meet my eyes. My client is prepared to agree to a payment plan, Sterling began stiffly. $1,500 per month for $70,000 paid in full within 90 days, Jennifer interrupted. That was the offer. It hasn't changed. She doesn't have $70,000, Sterling said. The medical board has suspended her residency. She has no income. Then she'll need to liquidate assets or take out loans, just like Lula did to fund her education. Sarah finally looked up at me then, and I was startled by the hatred in her eyes. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything I worked for. Everything you worked for. I couldn't help the bitter laugh. Sarah, I worked for your degree. 2 jobs, 16-hour days, while you posted beach photos and told people your rich parents were funding you. I never asked you to. Stop. Jennifer's voice cut through. Ms. Thompson, you have dozens of written communications thanking your sister for the loans and promising repayment. Don't insult our intelligence by claiming otherwise. Sterling shifted uncomfortably. There's another matter. The medical board investigation has uncovered some irregularities. They'll likely be pursuing criminal charges for the misappropriated funds. That has nothing to do with our civil matter, Jennifer said coolly. It affects my client's ability to pay. Your client should have considered that before stealing from charity funds. Sarah exploded. I didn't steal anything, I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back once I started my residency. The admission hung in the air. Sterling closed his eyes in defeat, while Jennifer calmly made a note. You borrowed it, I said quietly, like you borrowed from me, always planning to pay it back later when it was convenient. When did later become never, Sarah? Don't act so righteous, she spat. You loved playing the martyr, poor Lula sacrificing for her ungrateful sister. You got off on being the victim. The accusation should have hurt. A week ago it would have, but now I saw it for what it was, the desperate lashing out of someone who'd run out of people to blame. I loved my sister, I said simply. That's all. I loved her enough to believe her lies and fund her dreams. My only crime was trusting you. A knock interrupted us. Jennifer's assistant entered with a sealed envelope. This just arrived by courier, marked urgent. Jennifer opened it, scanned the contents, and her eyebrows rose. She slid the letter to me. It was from Washington High School. Dear Ms. Thompson, the selection committee is pleased to offer you the position of principal at Washington High School, effective July 1st. Your vision for our students and demonstrated resilience in the face of personal challenges convinced us you are the right leader for our school community. The salary was more than double my teaching income. Full benefits, a house purchase assistance program, everything I'd sacrificed for years was suddenly within reach. Congratulations, Sterling said dryly. I assume this affects your settlement demands. Not at all, Jennifer replied. Justice isn't contingent on financial need. Sarah was staring at the letter in my hands. Principal, you're going to be a principal? Surprised? I asked. Thought I'd stay invisible forever. This is what you wanted all along, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. To surpass me, to prove you were better. No, Sarah. All I wanted was to help my sister. You're the one who made it a competition where only one of us could succeed. The meeting continued for another hour with Sterling trying various negotiation tactics, while Jennifer remained firm. Finally faced with no alternatives, Sarah agreed to the full repayment terms. She'd have to take out massive loans, sell her car, move back with our parents. The golden child was returning home tarnished beyond recognition. As we were leaving, Sarah grabbed my arm in the parking lot. Sterling and Jennifer were a few feet away discussing final paperwork. I need you to know something, she hissed. I did what I had to do to succeed. That's what separates people like me from people like you. You accept your place. I fought for more. Hey, and where did that fight get you? I asked, gently removing her grip. You're facing criminal charges. You've lost your residency, your fiancé, your reputation. I may have accepted my place for too long, but at least I can sleep at night. Sleeping is all you'll ever do, she said. Even as a principal, you'll still just be managing other people's children. I was gonna save lives. You were going to take lives, I corrected. Maybe not directly, but every dollar you stole from patient funds could have bought medicine, paid for transport to appointments, provided food for families in crisis. You put your comfort above their survival. That's not a doctor. That's a predator. She raised her hand as if to slap me, then caught sight of Sterling watching and lowered it. I wish I'd never had you for a sister. The feeling's mutual, I said sadly, but I loved who I thought you were. That has to count for something. I walked away, then leaving her standing in the rain that had started again. Jennifer caught up with me at my car. You okay? Better than okay, I realized. I got the job. She's going to pay what she owes. The truth is out. I'm free. The criminal investigation will be rough, she warned. You might have to testify. I'll testify to the truth. Whatever happens after that is Sarah's consequence to bear. That afternoon, I went to school to share the news and submit my resignation effective end of term. The announcement spread quickly, and by final period, my classroom was full of students and colleagues offering congratulations. Washington High is lucky to get you, Marcus said, grinning broadly. Those kids need someone who won't give up on them. Malik raised his hand. Miss T, can we still visit you? Like if we need help with college essays or just advice? My door will always be open, I promised. As I was packing up my desk that evening, my phone rang. Dr. Martinez. I heard the wonderful news. I knew they'd be foolish not to hire you. Thank you for being on the committee and for everything else. I did nothing but speak the truth. Your sister made her choices. The investigation is revealing patterns going back years. Multiple hospitals, multiple incidents. You didn't cause this, Lula. You just stopped enabling it. After we hung up, I sat in my empty classroom thinking about patterns. How long had Sarah been taking shortcuts, stealing resources, lying about circumstances? How many times had someone like me covered for her, made excuses, filled the gaps she created? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then noticed it was quite long. Mrs. Thompson, you don't know me, but I'm one of the nurses who worked with your sister during her rotations. We all knew about the missing funds, but were told to keep quiet or risk our jobs. Thank you for having the courage we didn't. She hurt real patients, people who trusted us. The Johnson family couldn't afford their son's asthma medication because the emergency fund was empty. Mrs. Chen had to choose between bus fare to chemotherapy and food because the transport fund had been drained. Your sister's fancy dinners cost people their health, maybe their lives. You're not the villain here. You're the hero who finally said enough. I read it 3 times, each word validating what I'd known deep down but struggled to accept. Sarah hadn't just hurt me. She'd hurt vulnerable people who had no voice, no power, no recourse. That night, I attended my first Washington High football game as incoming principal. The team was struggling down by 20 points at halftime, but they didn't give up. Neither did the sparse crowd cheering every small victory like it was a championship play. This would be my new world, not the gleaming halls of Whitmore Medical School or the elegant ballrooms of graduation galas. Just a struggling school full of kids who needed someone to believe in them the way I'd once believed in Sarah. The rain had stopped by the time I drove home, leaving the air clean and sharp. My apartment didn't feel cramped anymore. It felt like a launching pad. In 90 days, I'd have $70,000 to start fresh. In 2 months, I'd begin my new role. The future I'd deferred for 6 years was finally arriving. My phone rang once more as I was getting ready for bed. Mom, are you satisfied? She asked without preamble. Your sister is destroyed. She's talking about leaving medicine entirely. That's her choice. You did this. You ruined her. No, Mom, I stopped paying for her life. There's a difference. She's moving home. Your father and I will have to support her now, thanks to you. The irony was so rich I almost laughed. You mean you'll finally have to use some of that cruise money to actually help your daughter? What a concept! You're not welcome in this family anymore. I haven't been welcome for years. You just needed my money too much to say it out loud. She hung up without another word. I set my phone aside and made a cup of tea sitting by my window to watch the city lights twinkle through the clearing clouds. Somewhere in this city, 3 families were possibly sleeping better because the truth about stolen charity funds had surfaced. Somewhere, other siblings like me were finding courage to stop enabling their users. Somewhere, Sarah was facing the first real consequences of her life. And here, in a tiny studio apartment above a dry cleaner's, Lula Thompson was finally fully irrevocably free. The investigation would continue. The payments would come. The new job would begin. But tonight I was just a woman who'd learned the difference between love and enabling, between family and parasites, between sacrifice and self-destruction. It was a painful education paid for in tears and pounds of flesh. But I'd graduated with highest honors, and unlike my sister, I'd earned every bit of my success. 6 months later, October arrived with brilliant colors and crisp air that made everything feel sharper, more defined. I stood outside the courthouse in my best suit, a new one purchased with my principal's salary, and breathed deeply before climbing the stone steps. Jennifer waited at the top, briefcase in hand, and confidence radiating from every line of her posture. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as someone can be to face their family in court." "Oh, former family," she corrected gently. "Your real family is waiting inside." She was right. In the gallery sat Marcus, several former students, including Malik, who'd driven 2 hours from college, and Dr. Martinez, who'd taken a day off to support me. Even some of my new colleagues from Washington High had come. The contrast to Sarah's side was stark, just our parents and a few family members who looked distinctly uncomfortable being there. Sarah sat at the defendant's table, looking gaunt, and years older than her 28 years. The past months had not been kind to her. The criminal investigation had resulted in formal charges for embezzlement, though her trial was still pending. She'd been working at a medical supply company, the only job she could get with her suspended license. Preston had long since moved on, engaged to someone whose family money came without scandal attached. Judge Catherine Wells, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, called the court to order. This was the civil trial for my lawsuit to recover the loans separate from Sarah's criminal proceedings, but inevitably intertwined. Jennifer presented our case with surgical precision, bank records showing every transfer, text messages where Sarah acknowledged the loans and promised repayment, email threads discussing payment terms. The documentation was overwhelming and undeniable. "Your Honor," Jennifer said, "over the course of 6 years, my client provided $72,000 in direct payments, plus an additional $15,000 in personal loans taken out to cover the defendant's emergency requests. This doesn't account for interest or the severe personal cost to my client's health and well-being." Sterling, still representing Sarah, despite the criminal charges, tried to argue that the money had been gifts. Family members often help each other without expectation of repayment. My client believed these were generous gifts from a loving sister. Jennifer smiled coldly. "Then perhaps Mr. Sterling can explain this email from his client dated March 15th, 3 years ago." She read aloud, "Lula, I know the extra $3,000 is a lot to ask on top of the usual payment. I promise I'll pay back every penny once I'm established. You're not just my sister, you're my investor in a better future. Love, Sarah." Or this text from 2 years ago, "Got the money, thanks. Add it to my tab. LOL. Seriously, though I'm keeping track of everything I owe you. You'll be my first payment when I get that attending physician salary." The evidence continued for 2 hours. Each piece of communication painted a clear picture. Sarah had always known these were loans, had repeatedly promised repayment, and had manipulated her sister's love to keep the money flowing. When it came time for Sarah to testify, her story had changed dramatically from her public interviews. Now she claimed she'd been under tremendous pressure, that medical school had affected her judgment, that she'd never meant to hurt anyone. "I loved my sister," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I still do. I got lost in trying to succeed." "Lost enough to steal from patient charity funds?" Jennifer asked during cross-examination. Sterling objected, but Judge Wells allowed it. The defendant's character and pattern of behavior are relevant to establishing intent. Sarah crumbled under Jennifer's questioning. She admitted to taking money from the funds, claiming she'd always intended to pay it back. She admitted to lying about our family's financial situation to friends and colleagues. Most damning, she admitted that she'd been planning to cut contact with me after graduation to avoid repayment. "You felt your sister had served her purpose," Jennifer pressed. I thought she'd understand that family helps family without expecting anything back." "But you expected everything from her, didn't you? Money sacrificed silence about her contributions. What exactly did you give back?" Sarah couldn't answer. When I took the stand, Jennifer's questions were gentle but thorough. I testified about the second job, the health problems, the humiliation at graduation. But what seemed to affect the judge most was when I talked about why I'd kept giving. "She was my little sister," I said simply. "When she was 5, she broke her arm falling from a tree she'd climbed trying to get my kite. She was always reaching for things just out of grasp, and I always wanted to help her reach them. I never imagined she'd see my help as something she was entitled to take." "Do you regret helping her?" Jennifer asked. I looked at Sarah, then really looked at her. I regret that my help enabled her to hurt others. I regret that I didn't see who she really was sooner. But no, I don't regret loving my sister. I regret that she didn't love me back. Sterling's cross-examination tried to paint me as bitter and vindictive, but I answered each question honestly and calmly. Yes, I'd been hurt. No, this wasn't about revenge. I simply wanted what I was owed so I could move forward with my life. The most dramatic moment came when my mother took the stand as a witness for Sarah. She testified that I'd always been jealous of my sister, that the money had been freely given, that I was trying to destroy our family. Jennifer destroyed her credibility in minutes. "Mrs. Thompson, how many cruises have you taken in the last 6 years?" "I don't see how that's relevant." "Please answer the question." "Maybe 10 or 12. "Oh, 14 actually. Total cost approximately $120,000. "Did you offer any of that money to help with Sarah's education?" My mother's face flushed. "That was our retirement savings." "Retirement savings spent on vacations while your daughter worked herself into the hospital, funding your other daughter's education." "Lula chose to help." "Did she choose, or was she manipulated by family members who told her that's what family does while spending their own money on leisure?" When closing arguments came, Sterling made one last attempt to appeal to emotion over law. Family shouldn't sue family. Mistakes were made on both sides. Sarah's promising career was already destroyed. Wasn't that punishment enough? Jennifer's closing was masterful. "Your Honor, this case isn't about family drama or hurt feelings. It's about contract law and justice. The defendant took $87,000 in loans from the plaintiff, acknowledged these debts in writing multiple times, and now refuses to pay because she believed her sister would never have the courage to demand repayment. The plaintiff worked 2 jobs, sacrificed her health, and funded the defendant's entire medical education. The fact that they're related doesn't erase the debt, it makes the betrayal worse." Judge Wells took only an hour to deliberate. When she returned, her expression was stern. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The evidence clearly establishes that these were loans, not gifts. The defendant's own communications repeatedly acknowledge the debt and promise repayment. The defendant is ordered to pay the plaintiff $87,000 plus interest calculated at the statutory rate from the date of each loan." Given the defendant's current financial situation, the court will allow a structured payment plan of $2,000 per month until the debt is satisfied. Sarah let out a wail. I can't afford that. I'll have to file for bankruptcy. That's your choice, Judge Wells said coldly. However, I'll note that debts arising from fraud or embezzlement are generally not dischargeable in bankruptcy. You might want to consider that before making any decisions. She turned to me. Ms. Thompson, this court recognizes the extraordinary sacrifice you made for your sister's education and the dignity with which you've conducted yourself throughout these proceedings. The law cannot compensate you for the emotional and physical toll of your generosity, but it can ensure you're repaid financially. I hope you use this judgment to build the life you deferred for so long. As we left the courtroom, Sarah tried to approach me. Her lawyer held her back, but she called out, I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. I stopped and turned back. No, Sarah, I wanted a sister. What I got was my money back and my freedom. It's not what I wanted, but it's what I deserved. Outside, my chosen family surrounded me with congratulations and support. Marcus hugged me tightly. You did it. You stood up for yourself. How does it feel? Dr. Martinez asked. Like justice, I said. Complicated, painful justice, but justice nonetheless. That evening, I hosted a dinner at my new apartment, a 2-bedroom space near Washington High that felt palatial after years in the studio. My real family gathered around my table, Jennifer, Marcus, some of my former students, new colleagues who'd become friends. We toasted with wine I could finally afford to new beginnings and hard-won victories. A year ago, I said, raising my glass, I thought family meant sacrificing yourself for people who shared your DNA. Now I know family is the people who stand by you when you finally say enough. Thank you for being my family. My phone sat silent on the counter. No demanding texts, no guilt trips, no requests for money. The legal victory was satisfying, but the real triumph was the peace that came with enforcing boundaries and demanding respect. The payments would start next month. $2,000 monthly that would help me save for a house, take vacations, maybe even pursue my doctorate. Dreams deferred but not destroyed, just waiting for their turn. As my guests laughed and talked around my table, I thought about Sarah probably crying in our parents' house, facing bankruptcy and criminal charges. I told the truth in court. I didn't regret loving her. But I was done confusing love with enablement, done believing that family meant accepting mistreatment. The gavel had fallen on more than just a legal case. It had closed a chapter of my life written in sacrifice and silence. The next chapter, I decided, as I rejoined my chosen family celebration, would be written in bold strokes of self-respect and joy. Justice had been served, and it tasted like freedom. 2 years had passed since that day in the courtroom, and I barely recognized my life anymore. I stood in my office at Washington High looking out at students streaming across the campus and marveled at how much had changed. The graduation rate had climbed to 68% in my first 2 years as principal. We'd launched successful vocational programs, and our mentorship initiative had become a model for other struggling schools. But today was special for a different reason. Jennifer had called that morning with news I'd been waiting to hear. Sarah's final payment had cleared. After 24 months of payments, some late, some accompanied by bitter notes, but all eventually made, the debt was satisfied. $87,000 had been returned to my accounts with interest. It's over, Jennifer had said. You're officially free and clear. I'd expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt peaceful. The money had long since stopped being about the money. It had become about principle, about standing up for myself, about refusing to be erased from my own story. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Come in. Deshaun Williams entered, the same student his mother had asked about during my interview 2 years ago. He wore a mechanic's uniform from his after-school job and carried an acceptance letter. Miss Thompson, I got in the automotive technology program at State, full scholarship based on the portfolio you helped me build. Deshaun, that's wonderful. I came around my desk to shake his hand. You earned this. Nah, you saw something in me when everyone else saw lost cause. You changed my life. After he left, I sat at my desk thinking about changed lives. My own had transformed beyond recognition. The promotion had come with a house purchase assistance program, and I now owned a small but charming 3-bedroom home in a tree-lined neighborhood. My health had recovered fully once I could afford proper nutrition and regular medical care. I'd even started dating again, nothing serious yet, but the possibility felt like a miracle after years of having nothing left to give. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Happy Liberation Day, dinner tonight to celebrate. I smiled and confirmed. He'd remembered the significance of today without my having to mention it. As I prepared for an afternoon meeting with the school board about expanding our programs, Margie, my assistant, knocked and entered with an unusual expression. Ms. Thompson, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your sister. My stomach clenched. I hadn't seen or spoken to Sarah since the trial. Send her in, but please stay close by. Sarah entered and I barely recognized her. She looked older but somehow softer, the sharp edges of her ambition worn away. She wore simple clothes, not the designer outfits she'd once favored, and carried herself with something I'd never seen in her before: humility. Thank you for seeing me, she said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. What do you want, Sarah? She sat carefully in the chair across from my desk. To apologize. Really apologize, not the fake kind I did during the trial, and to tell you that I made the last payment today. I know, my lawyer informed me. It nearly killed me, she said with a rueful laugh. Working 2 jobs, living with mom and dad, driving a 15-year-old car. Everything you did for me, I had to do to pay you back. I think that was probably the point. The point was getting my money back. No, she said softly. The point was teaching me what I cost you. I get that now. We sat in silence for a moment before she continued. The criminal charges were dropped to misdemeanors. I pled guilty, did community service at a free clinic. Do you know what it's like to see people who can't afford basic medical care while remembering that I stole from funds meant to help them? I imagine it's educational. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said quickly. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I took from you, what I threw away, what I became. And what are you now? A medical assistant at a community clinic. I'll never be a doctor. My license was permanently revoked, but I can still help people just from a different position. Turns out I'm good at it when I'm not obsessed with status and money. That's good, Sarah. I'm glad you found a path forward. She stood to leave, then paused. I know I have no right to ask, but I hear amazing things about what you're doing here. The kids you're helping, the lives you're changing. I'm proud of you, Lula. You became everything I pretended to be, someone who actually makes a difference. After she left, I sat quietly processing the encounter. The sister I'd mourned for years, the one who'd climbed trees to retrieve my kites, had perhaps finally returned. Too late to rebuild what we'd had, but not too late to find peace. That evening at dinner with Marcus and Jennifer, I shared the encounter. They both listened with protective concern. Do you think she meant it? Marcus asked. I think she's finally experiencing consequences and growth, I said. Whether that leads to real change or just temporary remorse, I don't know. And honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. Her journey is hers. Mine is mine. Very zen of you, Jennifer teased. Very unlike the woman who cried in a rest stop 3 years ago. That woman needed to cry. She'd been holding it in for 6 years. I raised my wine glass. To that woman who survived long enough to become this one. We toasted and the conversation moved to happier topics. Marcus's upcoming wedding where I'd be giving a reading. Jennifer's promotion to partner at her firm. My doctoral program application finally submitted after years of deferral. As I drove home that night, I passed the dry cleaners where I'd lived in that tiny studio. A young woman was climbing the stairs to the apartment, looking exhausted in the way I recognized too well. I hoped her sacrifice was for something worthwhile, something that wouldn't consume her the way mine nearly had. My house was warm and welcoming when I arrived. I'd painted the walls in colors I loved, filled the rooms with books and plants, created a space that nurtured rather than merely sheltered. In my home office, the acceptance letter from the doctoral program was framed on the wall not because I'd decided to go, but because I finally had the choice. The money from Sarah's payments had been carefully invested. Some went to savings, building the security I'd never had. Some went to establishing a scholarship fund at Washington High for students like Deshawn, who needed someone to believe in their dreams. The rest was earmarked for travel, for experiences, for all the life I'd postponed. Before bed, I checked my email and found a message that made me smile. Malik had sent an update from his senior year at college, where he was student teaching and applying to graduate programs. Ms. T, I was teaching The Great Gatsby today and remembered our discussion about Daisy. I told my students what you taught us, that love isn't measured in what you sacrifice, but in how you grow together. One kid asked if I knew any real-life examples of healthy love versus toxic sacrifice. I told him about this principal I know who learned the difference the hard way and now teaches it to everyone she meets. Thanks for being that example. I closed the laptop and prepared for bed, thinking about examples and lessons. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in my own home, drive my reliable car to a job I loved, and continue building something meaningful. The scholarship fund would help its first recipient next year. The doctoral program would wait for my decision. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities that belonged entirely to me. In the end, Sarah had been wrong about so many things, but she'd been right about one: my job was done. The job of being a martyr, a sacrifice, an invisible support system for others' dreams. That job had ended the day I walked out of a graduation party with my dignity intact. My new job, being Lula Thompson, principal, mentor, friend, and architect of her own dreams, had no end date. It was a lifetime position with excellent benefits, and I'd earned every bit of it. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I thought about that young woman climbing the stairs to the studio apartment. Maybe someday she'd learn what I'd learned, that the difference between generosity and self-destruction was boundaries, that love didn't require disappearing, and that the most important person to save was always yourself. But tonight, I was just grateful for the journey that had led me home, not to a place, but to a life that was fully, authentically, unapologetically mine. 5 years had passed since that confrontation at Sarah's graduation, and on this crisp November morning, I stood before the entire student body of Washington High to accept the State Excellence in Education Award. The auditorium was packed with students, parents, faculty, and community members, filling every seat. Among them sat the people who mattered most: Jennifer, now a federal judge; Marcus and his wife, expecting their first child; Dr. Martinez, who had become a close mentor and friend; and dozens of former students whose lives had transformed along with mine. When I arrived at Washington High 3 years ago, I spoke into the microphone, my voice steady and clear. This school had a 42% graduation rate. Today, we're celebrating an 85% rate, with 70% of our graduates going on to college or vocational programs. The applause was thunderous, but I raised my hand for quiet. This moment wasn't just about statistics. But this story isn't really about numbers. It's about what happens when we stop accepting limitations, when we refuse to let circumstances define our worth, when we choose to see potential where others see problems. I caught sight of Deshawn in the audience home, from his apprenticeship at a Formula One racing team, a path that had started in our automotive program. Beside him sat Keisha, now a nursing student, and David, who'd just started his own construction business at 22. 5 years ago, I continued, I learned a painful lesson about the difference between helping and enabling, between love and self-destruction, between family and those who merely share your DNA. That lesson nearly broke me, but it also freed me to become who I was meant to be, and more importantly, to help all of you become who you're meant to be. The story I told next was one many in the audience had heard in pieces but never in full. I spoke about sacrifice and exploitation, about a sister who saw kindness as weakness, about parents who valued comfort over compassion. But more than that, I spoke about resurrection, how sometimes we need to let parts of ourselves die so that something stronger can be born. Every student who walks through these doors, I said looking at the current students, has been told in some way that they're not enough, not smart enough, not rich enough, not lucky enough. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. You are enough. You've always been enough. Sometimes it just takes someone believing in you until you can believe in yourself. As I concluded my speech, the standing ovation seemed to go on forever. But what touched me most was what happened after the ceremony. Sarah stood near the back of the auditorium, looking healthier than she had at our last meeting 2 years ago. She didn't approach. We'd established those boundaries clearly, but she was there, witnessing my triumph without trying to claim any part of it. Our parents were notably absent, their shame apparently stronger than any pride they might have felt. A line of people waited to congratulate me, but one conversation stood out above all others. A young teacher named Amanda approached with tears in her eyes. "Ms. Thompson, you don't know me, but my younger brother is in medical school right now, and he's been pressuring me to pay for everything because family helps family. I've been killing myself with 3 jobs thinking it was my duty. Then I heard your story from a colleague. You saved my life. I told him last week that I'll help what I can, but not at the cost of my own future. He was furious, but I held firm. Thank you for showing me it was okay to choose myself." We hugged 2 women who understood the price of misplaced sacrifice. After she left, Jennifer appeared at my elbow. "How many Amandas do you think are out there?" she asked softly. "Too many," I replied, "but maybe fewer now than before." The reception that followed was held in the newly renovated library, funded by grants I'd written and donations from alumni who believed in our vision. As I mingled with guests, my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. Another deposit to the scholarship fund, this one from an anonymous donor for $50,000 marked "for those who sacrifice wisely." Later, I discovered it was from Preston Hartwell's parents of all people. Apparently, their son's broken engagement to Sarah had led him to some soul-searching of his own, and he'd eventually married a social worker who opened his eyes to real service. The family had become quiet philanthropists, supporting education initiatives across the state. Even the worst chapters of our stories could lead to unexpected good. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone in my office, looking at the wall of photos I'd accumulated. Students at graduation, teachers collaborating, community members volunteering. But the photo that drew my eye was a small one in the corner me from 6 years ago, gaunt and exhausted, taken by a student who'd worried about my health. I kept it as a reminder of where I'd been and why I'd never go back. A knock interrupted my reflection. Sarah stood in the doorway, having waited until the building was nearly empty. "I won't stay long," she said quickly. "I just wanted to give you this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000. "I know the debt is paid," she said before I could speak. "This is different. The clinic where I work started a patient assistance fund. I'm on the board. Ironic, right? We help families afford medications and treatments. I wanted to make a donation in your name, but then I realized you should decide where it goes." I stared at the check, then at my sister. "Why?" "Because every day I see families sacrificing for each other, and I try to help them do it without destroying themselves. I tell them about healthy boundaries, about sustainability, about how love shouldn't hurt. I learned that from you just too late for us." Sarah. "I know we can't go back," she interrupted. "I know I broke something that can't be fixed, but maybe some good can come from it. Maybe other families can learn from our mistakes." I thought for a moment, then handed the check back. Donate it to your clinic's fund, in memory of the sisters we used to be. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and turned to go. At the door, she paused. Oh, for what it's worth, you were the best sister anyone could ask for. I just wasn't worthy of that gift. After she left, I sat in the quiet of my office, processing the strange circularity of life. The girl who'd stolen from patient funds now managed them. The sister who demanded everything now asked for nothing. The family that had broken was building new ones, me with my chosen family and community, her with her work at the clinic. My phone rang. It was Thomas, the pediatrician I'd been dating for the past year. We'd taken things slowly, both of us carrying scars from past relationships, but lately, slow had turned to steady, and steady to serious. How was the ceremony? I'm sorry I couldn't make it. Emergency surgery ran late. It was perfect, I said, meaning it, and you were here in spirit. Several people asked about the doctor who's been volunteering with our health programs. I love those kids. Speaking of which, dinner tomorrow, I have something to ask you. I smiled, having a good idea what that might be. We'd been discussing moving in together, taking the next careful step in building something real. Wouldn't miss it. After we hung up, I gathered my things and headed home. The November air was sharp and clean, full of the promise of winter and the holidays ahead. This year, I'd host Thanksgiving for my chosen family, Jennifer, and her partner, Marcus, and his family, Dr. Martinez, some of the teachers who'd become like siblings to me. We'd cook too much food, share what we were grateful for, and celebrate the families we'd built, rather than mourn the ones we'd lost. As I drove past the old dry cleaners, I noticed the studio apartment was dark. Whoever had lived there had moved on, hopefully, to better things. The cycle continued, people climbing, falling, rebuilding, rising. My house welcomed me with the warmth I'd created there. In my study, the doctoral diploma hung beside the principal's certification and the Excellence Award from today. But the item that meant the most was a simple framed letter from Malik, written in his first year of teaching. Ms. T, today, a student asked me why they should care about English when life is hard enough already. I told them what you told me, that stories help us understand our own lives, that literature teaches us we're not alone in our struggles, that words have the power to change everything. They're starting to believe me. Thank you for teaching me to teach. Thank you for showing me that the best teachers are the ones who've struggled and grown and chosen to light the way for others. You didn't just save my life, you gave me the tools to save others. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. I made myself tea and settled into my favorite chair laptop, open to work on my book. A publisher had approached me after a speaking engagement interested in my story. From Sacrifice to Self-Worth, a guide to healthy helping, would be published next fall. All proceeds would go to the scholarship fund, completing another circle of giving, but this time, giving that empowered rather than enabled. The final chapter was proving the hardest to write. How do you end a story that isn't really ending but transforming? How do you conclude a narrative about growth when you're still growing? As I typed, the words finally came. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about the danger of giving too much. It was about the power of giving wisely. When we sacrifice ourselves, we teach others that we're worthless. When we maintain boundaries while helping, we teach them that everyone has value, including ourselves. The students I work with don't need another martyr. They need an example of someone who chose herself and in doing so became capable of truly choosing them too. I saved the file and closed the laptop, satisfied with the night's work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a board meeting about expanding our programs, a difficult conversation with a struggling student, plans for the spring graduation, where 90% of our seniors would walk across the stage toward futures they'd once thought impossible. But tonight, I was simply Lula Thompson, principal author, partner, mentor, survivor, and thriver. The woman who'd learned that sometimes the most profound act of love is saying no more. The teacher who discovered that the most important lesson was the one she'd taught herself, that every person deserves to be the hero of their own story, not a footnote in someone else's. As I headed to bed, my phone chimed with one last message. It was from Deshawn in Italy. Ms. T working on a Ferrari engine and thinking about, that day you told me my dreams weren't too big. My starting point was just different. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. I smiled and set the phone aside. This was why I'd survived the trial by sacrifice, not for the money returned or the justice served, but for these moments, these lives touched these futures, reclaimed these dreams given wings. The woman who'd stood in that graduation party 5 years ago, tears streaming down her face as her family discarded her, couldn't have imagined this life. But she'd taken the first step by walking away, and every step since had led here to a life rich with purpose, bright with hope, and filled with the kind of love that multiplies rather than diminishes. Tomorrow I'd wake up and continue the work, but tonight I fell asleep knowing that the best revenge truly was a life well lived, and mine was extraordinary, not despite the pain I'd endured, but because I'd transformed it into power, purpose, and peace. The story that began with sacrifice had become one of triumph, and the best part? It was only the beginning. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. If you've ever found yourself sacrificing too much for family who didn't appreciate it, or if you've struggled with setting boundaries with those you love, you're not alone. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and the power of choosing yourself. Share this with someone who might need to hear that their sacrifice is seen, their pain is valid, and their future can be brighter than their past. Remember, loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. Sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching others and yourself that everyone deserves respect, appreciation, and the chance to thrive. Until next time, may you find the courage to value yourself as much as you value others, and may your sacrifices lead to growth, not grief.